Good morning. I'm going to call us to order. This is TRPA's Advisory Planning Commission meeting. It's Wednesday, July 8th, 2026, 9:32. And we're going to go over to Catherine to help us do a roll call for our quorum. Or Tracy, sorry.
That's fine. I'll do the roll call and then Catherine will cover the rules. Thank you. Mr. Olling?
Present.
Mr. Altman? I believe he is currently in traffic. He's on his way. Ms. Carr?
Good morning.
Mr. Drew?
Good morning.
Mr. Elric? Mr. Ferry?
Good morning.
Ms. Sullivan?
Yes.
Ms. Foster?
Here.
Ms. Jacobson? No, here. Mr. Letton?
Good morning.
Ms. Marolas O'Neill?
Good morning.
Ms. Cyber?
Good morning. Hello.
Mr. Swenson? Mr. Teixeira? He will be joining us online if he's not here yet. Mr. Hitchcock? Chairman Smokey?
Here.
Mr. Young?
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Great, thanks. Sounds like we have good attendance today for the heart of summer. So thanks for being here, everyone. And Catherine, I'm going to go to you. You get the pleasure of reading the remote meeting rules of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For members of the public joining us today, to observe the meeting, visit trpa.gov. Under the calendar header, select Advisory Planning Commission meeting, hybrid meeting for today's date. There, you'll find a link to the public webinar. To make a comment, raise your hand by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen when the relevant agenda item comes up. If you've joined by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. For informational items, public comment will be taken at the end of the meeting during general public comment. For action or possible action items, public comment will be taken before the commission takes any action. For remote APC members, please raise your hand to speak. Mute your microphone unless you are speaking and keep your camera on if you are able. Remote APC members may not use the chat box to make any comments or to have sidebar conversations.
Thank you, Catherine. And we will go to approval of the agenda. Any changes to the agenda today?
Mr. Chairman, there are no changes.
Thank you, John. We'll approve that agenda approved as it was posted for the record. And I'll take us on to item 3, which is approval of our minutes. We do have a draft set of minutes from May 13, 2026, which was our last meeting. That is on page 5 of your packets. Any members of the commission have comments or questions on the minutes?
This is Hope Sullivan. I'll be abstaining.
Thank you, Hope. Mr. Ehrlich, you have something? Could you turn your microphone on?
Oh, sorry. Still tired. I think page 41, I might add an extra H in my name.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Any other comments on the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve.
Thank you, Jennifer. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 I know we have Ms. Sullivan abstaining. Anyone else wish to abstain on this vote?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Garth Olling, I'd like to abstain due to my absence. Thank you.
Thank you, Garth. Okay, great. Thank you all. And I'll move us on to item 4. This is planning matters. Item 4A is a presentation on the Tahoe Keys Green Infrastructure Plan. Information on that item can be found on page 45. And I'm going to turn this over to Miss Navarro from TRPA to present on this item.
Mr. Chairman, if I could
we'll go to John.
tee up Shay's presentation. You all remember that earlier you asked us to, I think it was Member Young, how do we implement these plans that you all keep recommending approval of? And so we brought a presentation from Jim Marino and TTD on one of the corridor areas Shay's been before you talking about the process of developing, in general, stormwater infrastructure and the plans and the changes in coverage when that happens. And so now, following along, we're happy for her to be able to present to you an actual one of these stormwater infrastructure plans being done and starting to get implemented. So I just wanted to give you that context because a lot of people have said, well, yeah, you want to do stormwater systems, but how in the world is that going to happen? Well, hopefully between the last presentation and this one, you'll see how it's happening, how it happens, and that it is happening. So that's the introduction. So now I'll be happy to turn it over to Shay.
Good, thanks, John. Good morning, Shay.
Good morning. Morning, Mr. Chair, other members of the APC. I'm Shay Navarro, TRPA's Watersheds and Water Quality Program Manager. Thanks, John, for the introduction. And I'll be presenting today about green infrastructure planning in the Tahoe Keys for the purpose of accomplishing area-wide water quality treatment. This is an informational item only. There's no action. But yeah, just want to update you on progress that's being made. So protecting water quality and lake clarity has always been a key focus for TRPA. It's been central to our formation. And we have 10 environmental thresholds, TRPA, that establish shared goals and for the restoration and environmental quality in the region. And TRPA's water quality threshold looks to return the lake to 1960s water clarity and algal levels by reducing nutrient and sediment in surface and runoff and groundwater. And to that end, TRPA's regional plan and code require all developed parcels to implement stormwater BMPs to stabilize sediment and infiltrate runoff. Additionally, next slide, sorry. And then, so that was our water quality threshold slide. Next slide. Our plan and code require all developed properties to implement stormwater BMPs. Sorry, next slide. And additionally, the Clean Water Act requires states to establish total maximum daily loads, plans and programs to restore impaired waters that do not meet water quality standards. And the decline of Tahoe's clarity led to its listing, and the Lake Tahoe TMDL aims to restore Lake Tahoe's deep water transparency. The TMDL has identified fine sediment particles from urban uplands as the most dominant pollutant of concern, leading to or contributing to impairment of Tahoe's deep water transparency. And local jurisdictions under the overview of the two states work to reduce pollutant loads by implementing water quality improvement projects, doing operation and maintenance activities like street sweeping, as well as using parcel level BMPs to meet those pollutant loads. Next slide. The last time I was here, my presentation focused on area-wide treatment as an alternative way to meet TRPA's requirements. And we talked about all of the various situations where area-wide treatment could apply. So area-wide treatment, rather than having runoff treated parcel by parcel, like shown on the left-hand side of the image, area-wide treatment takes a watershed approach and treats runoff from properties and roadways collectively, as shown on the right-hand side. The inability to meet TRPA's infiltration requirements due to on-site constraints like high groundwater is one situation where area-wide treatment can provide greater water quality benefit compared to parcel by parcel BMPs. Next slide. And this is exactly the situation at the Tahoe Keys. The Tahoe Keys was built in the Upper Truckee Marsh at the bottom of the watershed in one of the most sensitive areas around the lake. And high groundwater there limits infiltration, makes it difficult for individual parcels to meet TRPA's requirements. Next slide. With miles of backyard waterways and boat access, aquatic invasive weeds are a critical issue in the Tahoe Keys, and significant investment has gone into control work and in this area. Reducing sediment and nutrients from the urban uplands helps support this effort. Next slide. The project area focuses on the residential side that primarily flows into the West Lagoon, but also into Lake Tlac and the Pope Marsh. The neighborhood is relatively flat with driveways draining to the streets, which are owned by the city of South Lake Tahoe, and they have limited space in the right of way. And then we have the gray areas shown on the project area that are the TKPOA common area parcels, which provide opportunities for treatment. And doing planning work here really requires partnership between both the city, the TRPA, and the Tahoe Keys Property Owners Association to really look at the watershed scale and identify the best places where we can treat both driveways and roadways collectively. Next slide. Last time I presented, we went over the process to develop an area-wide treatment, and this project follows that same process. So we'll be going through each of these steps in this presentation. Next slide. So working with Tahoe RCD, the City of South Lake Tahoe, the Tahoe Keys Property Owners Association, Design Workshop, and Wildscape Engineering, and using funding from the US EPA, we developed the Tahoe Keys Green Infrastructure Conceptual Plan, which can be downloaded from our project story map and is linked to in your staff summary. Next slide. The project aims to reduce stormwater pollutant loads, provide treatment, but is also a multiple benefit planning effort. Green infrastructure can help reduce these pollutant loads and support the AIS control work that's been undergoing in the Tahoe Keys. Other priorities include reducing landscape water use, improving active transportation connections, enhancing wildlife habitat, and focusing on climate change resilience with greater fluctuation of extreme events that we'll anticipate seeing in Tahoe. The project identifies opportunities for green infrastructure that combine stormwater treatment with all of these other benefits in the plan. Next slide. We first went through a watershed scale analysis looking at existing infrastructure, land use that led to pollutant loading, microtopography, soil types, as well as the TKPOA common area parcels as opportunities. And from that, next slide, we also looked at the types of treatment given the site constraints. We focused on very shallow infiltration, pre-treatment to remove coarse materials and facilitate maintenance, flow through treatment methods, and filters in some locations. Next slide. The conceptual plan, this is a call out of some of the specific areas in the plan that focus on the higher loading locations where space is available on TKPOA common areas. We also focused on active transportation improvements. Treatments include vegetated swales and rain gardens, catch basin media filters, and conservation landscaping in snow storage areas, medians, and surrounding turf. Next slide. We use the pollutant load reduction model to make watershed level comparisons to determine if the proposed treatments met TRPA's requirements to provide greater or equal water quality benefit to parcel level BMPs, which is what is required in the code. We also have special circumstances in this location because of high groundwater. So we were looking at both situations of how much benefit, water quality benefit, our proposed treatment could produce. Next slide. And running the model, we determined that proposed treatments do demonstrate greater water quality benefit compared to parcel BMPs. The proposed project, when fully implemented, will reduce 9,403 pounds of fine sediment particles per year, almost 3 times greater benefit than if all parcels implemented full BMPs. And I just want to say that all models are wrong, but some models are useful. And this model gives us an opportunity to make relative comparisons. So it's really a planning tool. Next slide. As part of the plan design workshop, completed renderings of what proposed improvements could look like at key TKPOA common area parcel locations. And here treatments primarily focused on conservation landscaping and shallow infiltration. Next slide. Wildscape Engineering also developed several detailed drawings of typical green infrastructure treatments that can be used in permit level plans. Next slide. And we went through a stakeholder process that included site walks and bi-weekly meetings with key stakeholders, as well as presentations at 2 TKPOA board meetings. And the feedback that we received from residents and the public on the location and materials of active transportation components and priority locations for green infrastructure improvements were integrated into the plan. Next slide. And so now we're moving into the implementation, which is going to be a phased approach. And that includes developing permit level plans. In this case, these can be approved at the staff level. We also developed an operation and maintenance document outlining roles and responsibilities between TKPOA and the city to maintain and operate the proposed treatments, depending on where they're located. And we're also pursuing funding through private-public partnerships, where we are pursuing grant funding. We have funding from TKPOA, the city of South Lake Tahoe, and potentially mitigation funds as well, helping to move us through the implementation phase. Next slide. Most immediately, the Tahoe Keys is undergoing a water line replacement project, and this actually triggered BMP improvements on a large TKPOA parcel, and we were able to integrate the green infrastructure that treats both parcel and roadway runoff into those plans. And this really is a testament to the partnership that we've developed with the TKPOA and the city. Next slide. The city is also working on replacing some infrastructure. There is a failing pipe at the end of Alawai, where rather than just replacing in kind with another pipe that sitting in high groundwater will likely fail over time again, we're replacing that with a swale. And both of these are in the permitting phase with the expectation that they will go to construction this season. Next slide. For individual homeowners, the focus is really to do source control BMPs to stabilize sediment, meet fire defensible space, and implement conservation landscaping to reduce the amount of turf and mow, blow, and go landscape care, as well as irrigation. TRPA worked with Design Workshop to develop a conservation landscape idea book to meet TRPA's requirements for water quality, fire defensible space, and water conservation, and really help properties through the process. And if you drive around the Keys, even just anecdotally, you'll notice that there's a lot of change happening in people's landscapes. You have to make any landscape changes, you have to go to the Architectural Control Committee, and they rely on this book to help guide people with any updates that they're doing on their landscape. Next slide. As part of our EPA funding, we are working to identify potential locations for green infrastructure in the right-of-way fronting private parcels upstream of drop inlets. That process is underway right now, doing that analysis and mapping. And once we have a solid set of properties identified that are feasible, we are going to direct mail to property owners as well as do some outreach through the Keys Breeze to identify willing participants where green infrastructure could be implemented on what is in the right of way, but most people view as their front yard. And next slide. And then once sections are built, we will update the BMP database to show area-wide participation. This is sort of the last step in the process. And this is just an example of what that could look like. Every property, TRPA tracks every parcel's BMP status in the basin, and it will show that properties are participating in an area-wide treatment to meet their full obligation for stormwater management. Next slide. So in summary, we put together a green infrastructure plan. This is a multiple benefit project. It incorporated stakeholder feedback. We are in the implementation phase and are really pursuing public-private partnerships to get that done. We're pursuing additional opportunities for residential properties. We're doing that analysis right now, and we'll have future engagement through direct mail and the Keys Breeze article. Next slide. So again, this is an informational only item. There's no action, but I am here to update you on the progress that we've been making, as well as to provide you with an example, especially local jurisdictions that may be interested in pursuing area-wide treatment in other locations. This is an example going through that process. It's probably the second one that we've completed. We're working on a third one in Placer County currently. So I am happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Shay. Pretty cool project. Thanks for showing it to us. I bet we have some comments and questions. I see Mr. Teixeira's hand up, so I'll start with you, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Steve Teixeira, on behalf of my constituents, the Tahoe Transportation District. Thank you, Shay. Very interesting project and a very tough environment there. I understand that you did make a presentation recently to the Tahoe Keys Property Owners Association Board, and then that was fairly well received. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
That was good to hear. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Easy one for Shay. Softball start. Yes. Mr. Ehrlich, let's go to you.
A good presentation, and I found it useful looking through the study plan. What was that thing called? The Tahoe Keys Green Infrastructure Project link on that. Take a look at some of the numbers on the watershed size on like Camp Richardson and Tahoe Keys watersheds. I think some of the numbers there are off. It was, one of them was showing the Tahoe Keys watershed is larger than the Camp Rich watershed. And let's see. And I appreciate the difficulty of trying to do parcel level BMPs in the Keys. So that's clear that it makes sense to look at commons lands for handling some of the runoff issues. Are you envisioning using active transport, like pumping from roadsides to these areas that you have?
We are not looking at any kind of pump and treat system. We are using passive gravity flow through treatment, retrofitting of existing DIs, or installing shallow infiltration before runoff has a chance to flow out to the lagoons.
That makes sense. in the Keys, I think probably on those streets, they don't apply as much abrasives as other areas because it's sunny. So in terms of the TMDL load model, was it estimating loads using a figure for maybe the city was using for how much abrasives it would apply and how that would contribute to fine sediment? I don't know if that's something you would know.
I do know that the city does street sweeping in that area,
Mhm.
and I am unsure I don't believe at this time that this catchment is registered.
Mhm.
But if and when they do register it, whatever street sweeping activity that they do, that will go towards the calculation of the load reduction. That's a little bit different than, modeling just the load from the stormwater runoff, which does take into account land use. And, we use the standard protocol put together by the total maximum daily load that all jurisdictions in the basin use to estimate load reduction. So I feel confident that the model is up to par with what is needed to comply with the TMDL.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the fact that there's components of this dealing with landscaping on the private parcels to try and discourage some of the practices that might lead to nutrients getting out into the waterways. I think the Keys is kind of unique in that I think a lot more of the pollutant load might come from the landscaping practices rather than like a street application of abrasives and that kind of wear. So any opportunities to look at ways to incentivize even more the property owners to adopt more conservation friendly horticultural practices would be a good element.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Sure.
I will say that, putting down traction abrasives is one source of load, but the road itself and the degradation of the road itself is also a source of fine sediment. So we definitely, the model definitely considers road runoff with a higher concentration of pollutants than residential land use.
And is there any thought of maybe trying to incentivize? So some of the areas, there are not a lot of public, well, not common parcels to treat. I don't know if it makes sense to consider maybe stronger incentives if you can provide any to modify the landscaping practices in those areas where the runoff won't have a chance to go through some of the useful treatments that you're working on with this project.
Well, in the guidebook, we do, in terms of, we break it out by zone for the residential properties, and, the mid-century modern aesthetic at that time was turf from curb to lagoon. And that's definitely not, the kind of modern aesthetic. So, we talk about functional turf and the outdoor living zone where you can have turf where you're actively using it, but really looking at conservation planting to provide like a buffer, especially on the lagoon side. And I do feel that we have support and a good partnership with the TKPOA. Anytime somebody does a project or takes advantage of coverage exemptions that are eligible in the Tahoe Keys, they have to update their landscaping and adhere to the requirements that are in that guidebook. So I do feel like there is a lot of change happening in the Keys. It won't be every property, but we're seeing progress being made.
But I can add to that. Good point that there are different approaches in different areas. I think that's important for the APC to note that as Shea and the local governments, and it's really the local governments who need to do this to meet their TMDL credit requirements. go into each area, they're going to look at different things. There's some things that would apply in the Keys that might not apply, say, up in Kings Beach or something like that. So we are trying to do, instead of doing one size fits all, we're trying to do this as a way to help the local governments. The easy TMDL stuff has been done, as you, I know, you know that. So as we move into the harder things, we're doing the best we can with the local governments to tailor make the solutions using the PLRM and this kind of approach. Most importantly, we wanted the APC to see that we are doing this. This is one of the number of ones that Shay's working on right now. Just your good point. Different package in each of the watershed, each of the service areas.
So in terms of like BMP certification, will just the parcels whose flows will go through some treatment be considered compliant? And what's the status of BMP requirements on like the little fingers of houses that stick into the lagoon and there isn't any of the commons land to treat their runoff in?
Well, we look at the entire neighborhood as, you know, when we did the modeling, we broke it out into a number of different sub catchments. Okay. And so we're implementing kind of piece by piece, focusing on the highest loading areas first. But I think that we would look at compliance for the entire neighborhood, whether every single drop of water is getting treated. That's not the point. It's more just on a regional scale, where can we have treatment? Where are the best opportunities? And we have shown that what is proposed will provide greater treatment by close to 3 times than compared to if everybody did their parcel BMPs, which we know isn't modeled, accurately because of high groundwater. It's challenging for people to actually meet that.
Right.
So I feel like we came up with this plan and we've modeled it, but whatever ends up getting implemented and registered is what will be finally modeled when they go to register it with the TMDL.
Okay.
But we do require all of the parcels to meet source control BMPs. And once the entire project is implemented, then we would show that the entire neighborhood is part of an area-wide treatment and that everybody's participating in that, because everybody pays TKPOA dues to help pay for operation and maintenance and on the common area parcels, regardless of if every drop of water is getting treated.
Okay, good. Good work on that. And I'm not sure how TMDL monitors or PLRM deal with groundwater in terms of, because that's what I'm thinking. If people are using too much fertilizer, it's not going to be a surface runoff issue as much as you'll have discharge through the sandy substrate out into the lagoons.
Well, a significant component of this plan does look at reducing turf and replacing it with conservation landscaping so that there's less need for fertilizer use, with the understanding that people still want some lawn to recreate and, whether it's in a common area parcel for throwing the frisbee or walking your dog, but really making sure that you have that conservation landscaping buffer to allow any surface runoff to flow through that before reaching the lagoons, or just to reduce the amount of turf overall.
Okay, well, thank you. Good work.
Thanks, Robert. I can chime in on some PLRM specifics too, because we do a lot of that work if needed, but good job, Shay. Mr. Swenson, I think you'd like to go, and then I'm going to go online to Mr. Young and Mr. Letton, who have had their hands up. So let's go to you, Harry, first.
First off, I really appreciate you going through that whole process of the planning. It gives me a better feel for it. Another piece of the element would be, you got estimates, or since you went through it, the timing and man hours to get through that. I mean, it's a complex level plan, but having some of that, I think, would be very informative to those of us here at the table.
Is that, you're asking more about like the workload?
How long did it take? You know, what are the challenges? How many man hours and that type of thing for, because you had a nice segment of this is what all the phases we go through. Well, how long did it take to do this one for a project of this size? How long did it take to do this one? And some of the challenges and things you might have done differently would be really beneficial for somebody like me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thanks. Yeah, Shay, maybe you, I don't know if you have rough numbers, but budget, timeline, or if you want to think about that, we can go to.
Yeah, maybe I can follow up with you on that, but I will say this was the second one that we went through and we're working on the third one now. So there's definitely we're able to benefit by using the same process. The first one that we did for Mountain to Marina took longer because we were figuring out exactly how we wanted to make the model work. And now that we have that protocol in place, we can just repeat it given the different situations on the ground, and it's faster each time. So we just started work in Placer County. It's really, dependent upon the amount of funding that you can get or, the different entities. This project, we got, I think, about $100,000 from EPA to do this work. I don't know if whatever the good, fast, cheap triangle, where if it's good and fast, it's not cheap, but if it's good and cheap, it's not fast. For Placer County, there's just two of us working on that, so it's a different dynamic, but again, we're going through the process. I think for Placer County, we're only doing the pollutant load reduction modeling piece first, just to see what's needed. So we're hopeful that that'll take maybe like 6 months.
Thanks, Shay. Mr. Young, let's go to you.
Thank you. Thanks in general to the agency for always doing such a good job and keeping us informed of what you're up to. So thanks for that. And specifically to this, BMP maintenance is always something that comes up in even some of our other discussions about how some of the other things we're going to do may work. And if BMP maintenance isn't efficient or isn't working, then some of our other models may not work as well. And BMP maintenance is just an interesting discussion in general. So I'm just wondering if you could briefly tell us how maintenance on green infrastructure, what that looks like, if it's different case to case, if there's a learning curve to it in terms of the maintenance. I can see that being maybe something that's new, and so maybe difficult to get people to want to try it. So I'm curious if you have any experience with people being hesitant to do this just because it is different and may have a learning curve to it, not only to design a green infrastructure system, but then the ongoing maintenance as well. So I'm just curious about that, and thanks again for being here today.
Yeah, I can respond to that. Thank you. One of the reasons we are pursuing area-wide treatment is because our regional plan in 2012 showed, the environmental document for that showed that doing area-wide treatment actually facilitates operation and maintenance. It's a lot easier to have funding for the local jurisdiction or other entity to do maintenance of regional infrastructure rather than following up with individual property owners to make sure that they're doing all of the maintenance on site. It's very time intensive and resource intensive to do that, and you don't always get the outcome that you want. And so one of the things, as I mentioned in my presentation, that we put together for this project was a document that outlined the roles and responsibilities for operation and maintenance between TKPOA and the city. The city is really responsible for maintenance of infrastructure in the right of way that they can easily use their Vector truck and street sweeper to go through, because that's typically the type of maintenance that they do. And TKPOA will be doing more of the landscaping type work on their common area parcels, which they already do currently. It will just be a different type of maintenance work rather than riding the mower and, you know, like I said, mow, blow and go. They will be, you know, doing more tending to plantings or fixing drip line irrigation or whatever it is. In this situation, the property owners are already paying TKPOA for through their HOA for activities like landscape maintenance. So there's a existing structure set up to collect revenue. I would say in other situations, maybe hesitancy is really for the local jurisdiction to figure out exactly what they want from each property to help provide revenue to do operation and maintenance. You know, we've had area-wide treatment installed on the Nevada side, where with the GIDs, we already have, again, that sort of system in place for funding to be collected and the GID to do maintenance, but that's not the same situation on the California side. And there's been different ways that you can set something up. Maybe the local jurisdiction doesn't actually want any revenue. They just want to have pre-treatment that the private properties install and maintain themselves. Other situations we've had where properties have paid a lump sum that then shows they're in compliance for a certain number of years, and they have a formal connection agreement between them and the city outlining those terms and conditions to participate in the area wide. So it really depends on each situation and the, you know, each jurisdiction. In the city alone, there's, you know, 3 or 4 different mechanisms for regional treatment that's been put in place, whether it's a community facilities district for the Bijou erosion control project. There's property assessments for Harrison Avenue. There's one-time lump sum fees for the state line stormwater on the California side. So there is a lot of different ways that, you know, the agreement between the property owners and the local jurisdiction can be implemented. And, you know, we allow for that flexibility to, you know, give the local jurisdictions whatever they need, you know, what makes sense for them in their situation.
Chairman, if I can add to that, Eric, you may or may not remember from when Shay presented the process that one of the steps was that the local government has to show how that's going to be operated and maintained and funded. And maybe to make it a little more general, and I know that people like Crystal could talk about what Placer County does outside of the basin, or Chairman could talk about what El Dorado County does down at El Dorado Hills, but you probably are familiar that with the Reno Sparks, Washoe County stormwater systems, I know in Reno, currently your stormwater is handled in your sewer bill, and Reno's been trying to separate that out and have a separate stormwater utility, separate from the sanitary sewer utility. Not a separate organization, but separate system, separate billing. Douglas County is looking at stormwater management utility now. So how it gets set up is really what works best with that particular jurisdiction, and gives credit to where there's already a system in place, like a property owners association. And so we aren't really dictating one particular model, but as Shay said at the beginning, the more important part is that these types of systems are way more effective at getting compliance and improving water quality than parcel by parcel. So in essence, what we're doing is retrofitting a basin that has over 50-year-old infrastructure that doesn't meet modern stormwater system standards that every new subdivision outside of the basin that's built does. So that's really what we're trying to do here. So
No, I get that. I appreciate the flexibility and I think I understand everything that you laid on the table there. I think what I'm curious about is the actual difference in the physical infrastructure between green infrastructure and other infrastructure. So in the presentation, there were some slides that showed, the need for some building permits and some underground design of a structure. And I'm curious if that never needs any maintenance at all, that never needs to be dug up and maintained or changed or fixed. What is I'm curious about the maintenance protocol and regime for green infrastructure. And if that is, if that's going to be the responsibility of a homeowners association, I'm fine that if it's just, working on the landscaping in a different way. But you had slides there that indicated there's some significant underground construction underneath that landscape. And so how does that get maintained? Does that require maintenance? And is there, how do people learn how to do that? And what's involved in the maintenance of green infrastructure that may not be involved in the maintenance of regular, whatever the term for regular infrastructure is? That's what I'm curious about.
well, not to repeat what Shay said, but depending on the type of facilities you have, that depends on the type of maintenance. If it's, say, a pipe under a street, you're probably going to have a vector truck come suck that out. In Reno, for example, which I'm assuming you're familiar with, they come every fall to vacuum the leaves out so it doesn't get clogged up with snow and rain in the winter. If you have an open facility where you're letting a settling pond happen, like is in the southeast part of the Truckee Meadows, again, I'm using examples that Eric's familiar with. Sorry for the rest of you, but that's handled by how you mow and clean that out, and as she mentioned, how the TKPOA will mow and clean out their particular facility. So we are working right now with all of the public works departments and stormwater departments to come up with a set of facility designs, and the ones they select to put into any particular system, I'm sure they will take into consideration the maintenance, including snow removal, things like that. So it's really going to be up to the individual design of each system, what the facilities are, what the maintenance requirements are, and who will be doing that. Hope that helps.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add, as I said, we did come up with a document that identified the roles and responsibilities for, each of the systems, who does what. And the designs that we pursued really took like a treatment train approach where, you're having sediment traps that can be vectored out easily to remove coarse material. And by doing that, that prolongs the longevity of the shallow infiltration or the flow through treatment. But really looking at, who is best suited to do what, and what, as John said, it really depends on what type of treatment is proposed. Green infrastructure just means that you're using soil and vegetation to provide treatment as water infiltrates or runoff infiltrates through it. So in a lot of situations, local jurisdictions are already doing maintenance of green infrastructure, even if they don't call it that. Any kind of stormwater basin is a type of green infrastructure. But again, really, as we're learning, we really need to emphasize pre-treatment to make sure that coarse material is being taken out first, so that the infiltration of stormwater basins can be maintained over time. I think that's something that has been talked about at SWIC pretty regularly, and is something that group is really looking at, to optimize designs, and, that, maybe you have a settling basin first that you can take out, and then it goes into a place that can infiltrate. In the Keys, we're limited on how much infiltration we can have. So having these linear facilities where water can flow through and go through vegetation, which is more of like a landscaping type feature, is important to provide treatment. And the model really looks at each treatment type as well and provides different load reductions accordingly.
Thanks, Shay.
Thank you.
That's a thorough answer. Yeah, that's how we design things. Treatment train. Great. Let's go to Mr. Letton.
Yeah, great presentation and body of work, Shay. Really appreciate your efforts here. Actually, on the last point there, I'm curious if any of the modeling you did quantified nutrient reduction in those common areas.
Yeah, we ran the pollutant load reduction model. So we have load reductions for fine sediment, phosphorus, and nitrogen. So I can pull those up.
Does the model account for that shallow groundwater component that was mentioned by one of the previous APC members?
I'll just chime in there. One of the inputs into PLRM is your soil type, which is all mapped by NRCS. And so those soils reflect, permeability, groundwater depth, those types of things. So that's how the model associates treatment effectiveness regionally, because you upload the GIS files for the soil type for your treatment areas, and then the model can reflect sort of treatment capacities within the soils. But I don't think you actually enter a groundwater depth because that's so variable.
This is Robert Ehrlich. I was wondering, it seemed way in the past, last millennium or so, the Keys had
excuse
sort
me,
of
I have a few other questions. Are you
I'm just adding to
on?
this one. Yeah,
Okay.
I think if the soil type, I thought Keys was given kind of a special soil type that allowed a higher percentage coverage than would normally be found for something with that depth of water table. So I'm not sure how that worked for the Keys soils, but I think the Keys were not under the same system. There was like a blanket thing that sort of gave them 25 or 30% cover, I think. I'm sorry, Ben, go ahead.
No.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because I just, with the Keys specifically, load reduction for fine sediment is great, but with the current proliferation of AIS there, where nutrients is front and center in terms of, priority, I think, in terms of overall, load reduction. So that's really the nature, why I asked this question. My other question, real quick, Shay, was the US EPA funding you mentioned, and then the board packet mentions community watershed planning funds. What specific funding source within US EPA was that? I'm curious.
It was community watershed planning funds. That was the source.
Okay.
And it was something, I don't know. I don't know beyond that.
Yeah. It wasn't 319. It wasn't 319H though.
No, it was not.
Okay.
It was not.
Because I think the Keys are applying separately for some 319H fund. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Ben, this is Jennifer. I don't know for a fact, but it sounds like 604B money.
Okay, 604. Yeah, Jennifer understands the specificity of his interest.
Yeah, I can follow up with our funder Phoebe at EPA to get more information if you're interested. But I know it was community watershed planning money that we were able to use. One other thing, I know you were interested in nutrients. One thing I will say with fine sediment particles is I believe the TMDL shows that phosphorus typically adheres to fine sediment particles. So reduction in FSP really helps with phosphorus load reduction as well. And then nitrogen's a little bit more difficult because we have atmospheric deposition, but given that that fine sediment is the dominant pollutant of concern, that's really what we focused on.
Yeah, certainly the fine sediment can be a surrogate for other nutrient reduction. Good point. And then just real quickly, I don't know if I missed it, but in your presentation, did any of the have you assessed area-wide treatment opportunities on the private parcels within the keys outside of the common areas?
That's what we're working on right now. We're basically looking at locations upstream of drop inlets, especially, there's so much limited space. There's also a lot of utility constraints that are clustered in certain areas. So we are in the process of doing an analysis and ground truthing. We identified all the properties that are adjacent to a drop inlet. Did some work to screen out where underground electrical utilities were included. And now we're going and doing ground truthing to really identify where good opportunities for green infrastructure could occur on private parcels that technically are in the right of way, but like I said, is really somebody's front yard. But if there's, a giant cedar tree or a slope or a retaining wall, those might not be good situations. But as we go through that analysis, then we'll have a list of properties that we will directly reach out to, talking about green infrastructure. And just anecdotally, as we've had people out in the field doing this work, people have come out asking what we're doing, and that can always be an unknown in the Keys. You don't know if someone's going to tell you to get off their property, or even though you're in the right of way, or be supportive. But everyone's been really interested and excited about the green infrastructure. Again, there's been already replacement of median landscaping from what used to be turf, and lodgepole pines is now being replaced with decomposed granite and other drought tolerant type plantings that require less irrigation and are compatible with snow storage and things like that. So I think people are seeing that changes are occurring and are supportive of it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because with the MS4 stormwater permit we have with the city, there have been some exceedance of numeric water effluent limits at those outfalls, which is, adjacent to some of those drop inlets. So to the extent that, some area-wide projects can help reduce that, that would be great. So appreciate the response there, and nice job. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate that. Ashley?
Yeah, thank you, Ashley Cyber. And thanks, Shay. This plan is a great start. It goes, so much farther than we have had so far in thinking through these areas a little more effectively. And I think what you're seeing, the group recognizing that maybe there are still some areas that we could go a little bit further in. I think nutrient loading has been brought up by a couple of folks, and seems to be one of those gaps. And I recognize that fine sediment is a pretty good proxy for phosphorus, but as you recognize that nitrogen, tends to be a little bit more of a difficult one. So it's water soluble, and if it's in the water, it just follows the water. And the Tahoe Keys is sort of the main example of this, but there's other areas. And we've sort of, with this, we've recognized that these parcels are not able to effectively treat their own, their own stormwater and their own on their own properties, and that we need this larger approach to it. So, I mean, we're already essentially acknowledging that, this is moving off the site and that it's not being treated there. We're trying to do some additional things, to get these parcels as good as they can, but there's essentially this acknowledgement that it's essentially sort of being dealt with elsewhere. And so we're already sort of making this acknowledgement that they're already special. And so are there ways to maybe add some additional requirements on? And I know that this is probably a little bit outside of this conversation and gets into a few other things, but if in these areas, like I said, we're already saying this is a special area. So now you are contributing into this group type, common fund for the maintenance of these things. We're recognizing that these areas are being treated in this way. And so maybe adding some additional requirements on for if you're in one of these areas, then now if you want to have your lawn, you want to have these areas that are a little higher nutrient necessity, okay, fine. But maybe you need to, maybe there's more of like an application process and you actually get, somebody's actually caring and looking at, the application rates that you're using and making sure that folks are not just, when it gets dry out and they look outside and their lawn is a little not quite as green, just, going and throwing out other stuff out there. The lawns are not the only problem. That's kind of the visible one that we all, is easy to talk about. So, just maybe thinking a little differently about these areas and adding either incentives or disincentives to do some of these things that we're recognizing that are just really difficult once these nutrients are in the system, they're very difficult to deal with. We can get some of it out with dealing with the fine sediment, but there's a lot of other nutrients besides just the phosphorus and the nitrogen that come with these things here. So maybe taking it a step further in having some additional requirements or additional ways that incentives or disincentives can be built into this whole watershed approach to the treatment. So thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Any other comments? Brad?
Thanks for your presentation. Brad Altman from Placer County. I really like how you are addressing this. We have kind of these micro government situations with these HOAs, and that's where we have this kind of concentration where I think what you're doing can be super effective. And my question is, have you guys addressed or outlined and identified other HOA type situations that are kind of critical? Like obviously the Tahoe Keys is a huge natural filter that was kind of, it's not great, but other places like, from Placer County, I'm just thinking of like Tahoe Tavern, Tavern Shores, Star Harbor, Chinkaman. These are HOAs that do have like a high concentration of kind of lawn situation, and just in my mind, they're kind of ripe for the same sort of process that you've proposed here. So just have you guys identified other spots to do this?
Yeah, a lot of HOAs, large multifamily residential complexes, they're almost like mini area wides where we'll look at them collectively. So we don't just issue a certificate for one condo within an area. We want to make sure all of the common areas are treated. A lot of times the parking is on common area and each condo, the footprint of their building is their APN, but we look at treating those entire areas collectively. That's really still looking at, parcel level BMPs, but you're treating it for that entire area. So I feel like, we are doing that with the understanding that the HOA is responsible for operation and maintenance of whatever they install to meet those requirements. Yeah, and I mean, and again, it depends on each location. I can think of most recently there was a HOA and marina in Tahoe City that we just retrofitted. That's also in a high groundwater area and has a lot of turf. We did turf reduction and installed a lot of vegetated swales and things to provide additional treatment. In that case too, for protection of buildings and property, we really wanted to try to move water away from the structures because, there was a lot of sump pumps and just this cycle of people pumping out from under their property and putting it right next door, and then it would go back. And so really trying to look at how you could move water away and again, looking at that entire residential area collectively. So I do feel like that's happening at that scale and has been for, a long time with this program.
Thanks, Brad. Final
Robert,
thought?
Ehrlich, just to follow up, I looked up and it was saying that the keys were classified as class 6 man modified. So in the TMDL PLRM world, I don't know if that assumes a depth to water table and infiltration rate that's not consistent with what it would actually be at, particularly at lake high water levels.
The Tahoe Keys does have different depths to groundwater in different locations. It does rely on the NRCS soil survey, and it is separate from that man modified designation. But we went through a whole process and determined that the entire neighborhood is site constrained due to high groundwater, which is why we've taken this regional approach to, look at best opportunities to treat all of the runoff, private and public, collectively.
And that would be consistent with why the value of doing all the BMPs on the individual parcels was probably fairly low because of the high water table.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Crystal?
Yeah, thank you, Crystal Jacobson, for the record. I just wanted to say thank you. Great presentation. And I know we're working with you on another project now, and just really looking forward to the progression of that, to actually seeing improvements on the ground. So it's exciting. I think I might take a little tour through the Keys just to kind of see what's going on out there. But yeah, just thank you for your work.
Thanks.
Yeah, this is a great model. Pile on.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Ellery Foster for the record. Hi, Shay. I just wanted to echo what Crystal said. I think I continue to be impressed with TRPA's initiative in tackling really challenging, complex areas like the Tahoe Keys. So I just really appreciate your leadership in tackling this and your leadership in the area-wide space.
Agreed. I just had one quick question about, did you face any kind of equity issues with parcel owners that fully BMP'd their properties, say paid to do a full retrofit, got their certificate of completion, where now they may be also paying into area-wide treatments that aren't pertinent to their own parcel? Did that come up at all, or has that been an issue?
So far, that has not been an issue. I think, it's been probably over a decade that we've had this site constraint designation for the Keys. And yes, there are properties that installed full BMPs before, but there's, the question on how effective are those if they're inundated with groundwater half the time. And I don't feel like there's additional funding needed for the area wide because there's already funding going towards landscape maintenance of the existing landscape that we're just now replacing with these green infrastructure features that just are like landscaping but have stormwater that flow through them. So we haven't had anything raised at either of the TKPOA board meetings that we went to that all residents are participating in, or with the facilities people at TKPOA either.
Good. That's great to hear. I'm a little surprised, but I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, good.
Mr. Chairman, we have had, not us, but through the Douglas County work, we have had people who have area-wide systems make sure that they get credited as Douglas County setting rates. For example, the South Shore system that uses the Edgewood Golf Course ponds. So that at least there's crediting at the area-wide level.
That seems fair. Good. Okay, I think we can tie a bow around this one. I don't see any more hands, so we'll say thanks again, Shay. Good job. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you. I'll look forward to coming back in the future with hopefully updates on work that we're doing in Placer County.
Good. Okay, that was informational only, so no action today. I'm going to move us on to agenda item 4B. This is a presentation on the 2026-2027 Tahoe Regional Planning Agency Work Plan. Information on this item can be found on page 47. And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Hester to present on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Chairman, John Hester here. Mr. Chester, yeah. Jester. This is just an information presentation. To be honest, I stole the executive director's presentation to the governing board a few weeks ago and made a couple tweaks to it. So I really want to keep the APC informed about what the board is directing us to do. And it's also to set you up for a new task that they've delegated to you, which is the next item. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. This is just, you know a lot of this, or may remember it from when we did the orientation, but how we operate is we've got the bi-state compact as well as the designations from the two states to be the Water Quality Management Planning Agency, or WQMPA, and the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Transportation Planning. So those kind of give us our mission, our mandates. Compact calls for us to set threshold standards and do a regional plan to implement those. You all recommend amendments to those as they come up, and amendments to the Code of Ordinances, which is kind of our development code, if you want to call it that for shorthand. We use that with our permitting and compliance department. So every private project public or private, under the compact should be permitted, or we designate some that don't need permits. But we either do that or do that with memorandum of understanding to delegate some of the permitting authority to local governments, especially after they do the area plans. And then the environmental improvement program is, if you think about implementing plans, you can implement them through regulating development projects, but you also implement them by making public investments. So between the environmental improvement program and the transportation improvement program, which is part of our MPO work, we sometimes hit $200 million a year, which is, I think, outstanding for this region. So that's kind of how we operate, our mission statements there. Next slide. Just tell you a little bit about the agency. We're broken into these departments on the right. I won't go through every one of them. 77 employees, 14 interns. We have our biggest intern and seasonal employment group since I've been here 15 years. And it's kind of fun to see the young, energetic interns who are way more idealistic than jaded old planners like me, but we will have one of them working on your project I'll get to in the next item. Next slide. So we had our governing board meeting in last month was on the North Shore at Grand Labakan. We also took a field trip. The first day we had a board meeting and took a field trip. Crystal and some of the other Placer staff were there. This is a picture of all of us at the, I guess that's the Gatekeepers Museum deck or something. I don't know exactly what you call this, but we were also looking at the dam, and you may know from an information presentation, Bureau of Recs, looking at the dam. And then we went over to see Boatworks and to look at some of the other projects in Placer County. Got a little, some people were energetic and walked, saw the trail and what parts of the trail needed upgrades, and some, like me, rode the bus. Anyway, the next day we had our retreat, and that's essentially where the board updates the priorities that are multi-year, which I'll cover in a second. Work plan items they want us to try to do in 1 year that are not ongoing things, and then the majority of our work plan is just ongoing work like permits and processing the improvement programs for the transportation and environmental improvement, those kind of things, inspections, so forth. Next slide. So the 4 priorities, this is nothing new to you all. Lake and watershed restoration, you heard a little bit about that from Shay. Forest health and wildfire, you've heard that when we've had people like Kat McIntyre and the work we're doing with the Tahoe Fire and Fuels team. And as you know, we have a representative of that through the fire service who's on your commission. Connecting Tahoe is our transportation work, and we have a transportation committee working on that. And as you know how we're doing things there from the presentation Jim Marino did, for example. And then Tahoe Living, which you are the designated lead group for the working group. And so Mr. Chairman is the chairman of that working group, and Emily Setzer from Placer County is the vice chair. And so you'll see code amendments and plan amendments and things coming from them occasionally. Next slide. So I'll go a little bit into these. The lake and watershed restoration, it's all of the different tasks that were specifically identified are looking at lake clarity. With some of the clarity reports, we've had requests of us and the Science Council, and Jennifer can probably speak to this better than I can, to look at is the science we're using to improve clarity adequate with things like climate change coming. So that's what AIS, aquatic invasive species. I think that's self-explanatory. Restoring watersheds, particularly the upper Truckee River watershed. My favorite acronym of all of the ones I've learned about here are the Upper Truckee River Watershed Advisory Group. UTterWAG, I don't know why. UTterWAG makes me think about cows, but anyway, if you find a better acronym, TUI-SWIG's pretty close. Threshold Update Initiative Stakeholder Working Group, which Jennifer leads, but it's another one of the ones been delegated to the APC. But anyway, that's Upper Truckee River watershed work, and the keys we just talked about, and stormwater treatment systems we just talked about. Next slide. Forest health and wildfire. You've probably heard, and I'm sure Ashley could talk for hours about this one, but that we are trying to make the forest healthier by, the fact that it's got kind of mostly one species, mostly one age because of the denuding of the basin for the Comstock in the mid-1800s, and the fire policies that now all of that is getting changed, but the forest needs to be made healthier. Public communications on that and supporting the fire and fuels team are parts of that one. Next slide. Connecting Tahoe, the transportation planning effort. We are leading a group talking about exactly who should be providing what type of transit where and how's that funded. It's pretty set up on the North Shore with TART and Washoe funding TART. Down here on the South and the TMA. Down here on the South Shore, the TMA is providing some of the transit, and Douglas County is putting in some money, and TTD is doing some of that. Some of that's being done through the TMA. So we're just looking at all of that, and we know we need more funding for the transportation system that everybody says they want. And then we're looking at what's affectionately called TSMO, Transportation System Management and Operations. We have a grant to upgrade that you may have heard of that before with the name Intelligent Transportation Systems, but what that really is providing information. You've seen signs that say there's a wreck ahead or whatever. A lot of that, the new generation of that is going to be showing up here. Or the idea there is that we can manage the system more effectively with technology. The Transportation Resiliency Improvement Plan and Communication Strategy was money. If you think about the example of this, where most of this has happened in this country is they've looked at, like on the southeast part of the country, when you have a natural disaster like a hurricane, is your system set up so that you can evacuate? Are there roads that are going to flood? In our case, we're looking at the system from the perspective of what kind of wildfire impacts might there be on the system, or if there's a landslide. Those are the kind of things, and we have a consulting group that's looking at past incidents and working with the emergency service providers to say what kind of transportation system improvements and what kind of communication to the communities that don't usually get communicated to improvements can we make. it's not evacuation planning. That's not what we do. That's what they do, but it's how can we make the transportation system and communications work better when we need it to do that. It also will help during destination management, like when we need to manage crowds like we did over July 4th. You know, we can use that same information, same planning, because a peak load is a peak load, whether it's an evacuation or too many people coming to some beaches. Regional parking collaboration. Placer's taking a lead on parking management in Placer County. TTD's working on it on the corridor, the 28 corridor. So we need to make all those pieces work together. Destination management I just talked about, and then coordinated implementation. No single project I can think of is one implemented by one group. There's usually the DOT, the local government, TTD, some multiple parties. The 28 corridor project, Jim Marino presented to you guys, is a good example of that. So that's that priority. Next slide. Tahoe Living, you all know more about this than you probably want to. There were three, Karen Fink doesn't like me to call them phases, but there were three phases. There are three phases. The first phase was ADUs and conversions of hotels to housing. And we worked on that about 3 or 4 years ago. Last, I guess, was the end, about a year and a half ago, we finished the phase 2, which were high density parking and coverage coverage changes based on stormwater systems related to kind of what we heard today. We are in phase 3 now. How can we reduce the time and cost for permitting those types of projects? Are there other ways besides stormwater systems that we can make land available, more coverage, less coverage requirements, more coverage available, and other ways to get the housing choice? Can we do lease to locals, those kind of programs? So that's what's being worked on right now, and that's what's in the environmental impact statement process. So next slide. These are the ones that the board would like us to get done this year. So threshold updates. I'm not going to say we won't get all the thresholds updated in a year, but we never have. Or the remaining thresholds. Jennifer probably remembers when she was a young woman who started working on this. Just kidding. We have a permitting process improvement plan that has been done and presented to the board and approved, and we're continuing to implement that. Ken Kasman and his group have come up with what we call the permit requirement tracking dashboard. And that is when we have requirements that go beyond the project being built. For example, one of the requirements is that we have on some projects is give us stream flow data, or give us information on who's getting what kind of tickets at Homewood, those kind of things. So those don't really easily fit into any process. So we actually created a dashboard to track those things and report to the board. Area plans, I'll talk about which ones we have coming up. The 30th Summit, Santini, Burton, or Burton Santini, depending on which state you look at it from. That bill, modernizing that bill and how it can be used, that funding source. Project that I started, but that the new person, chief planning officer, will get is updating the regional plan introduction. You may recall we integrated thresholds and the regional plan into one document. The current plan has 2 introductions, 2 tables of contents, et cetera. So we're trying to put that together and add the vision of more of a vision statement, vision map. And then the last but not least, community design standards. I want to emphasize this. The board is not expecting new community design standards. They're expecting a report in next April that will say what kind of community design standards should we look at working on. And I'll talk about that in the next item. Next slide. So these are a couple other things they recommended. We are assigning a person to work on shoreline education and outreach. For those of you who know, it took us 6 times to get a plan that didn't get attacked in court. And so now we've got a plan, we've been implementing it, and we're finding that we need to do some more education and outreach on that. And we probably will need to also do some tweaking of code interpretations, code amendments or something. But like any plan, when you get it, you adopt it, you put it in practice, then you find some communication shortcomings and other things like that. They want us to create a parking lot. I don't know if you've ever watched one of our board meetings, but the last one, Kim Carringer sat here and took notes. When she got through, there was a whole page of things they'd like us to work on. So what we're going to try to do, and one of our board members from the Nevada Secretary of State's office says, we have one of those, and we'll send you it. But what we're going to try to do is capture these, and it's probably going to be, Graham, tell me if you think I'm over exaggerating, we're probably going to have 100 items at the end of the year. And Graham's going to look at it. We're going to go to the board and say, you know, here's the 100. We can't do 100. What do you know, what are the top few that you want us to work on? But it's sort of like, so board members don't get frustrated and say, well, remember 6 meetings ago, I asked you to look at whatever, and it disappeared. Well, we're trying to develop a process for that. Have a joint meeting with TTD, again, back to that transportation funding and governance, and then ask the Washoe tribe to come make a presentation to the board, because we like to better understand and share information with them. So next slide. That's kind of an overview of what this organization is doing with our budget and grants and staff and what the board's directed us to do. And kind of hope set the groundwork for the next item, community design standards.
Right. Okay, good. A lot going on.
Yep.
Thank you for updating us.
Okay. Want me to go to the next item or answer questions?
Does anyone have questions here, or do we want to go on to the next item? It's related and it has an action. This is informational, but you want to move? Let's move. Okay. Is that okay with you, Mr. Young? I see your hand up. Do you have any objection to that? I guess I'll ask.
I'm good. Thank you very much for asking.
Okay. Perfect. Let's just roll on, since
Okay.
it's related, to item 4C. This is consideration and possible recommendation for approval of the Community Design Standards Project Work Plan. This is on page 107 of our packets, and we're going to stay with John Hester here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You may remember when the threshold evaluation was being done and we were talking about scenic standards, came to this commission, and one of the things that you all said was, in terms of scenic standards and aesthetics and so forth in the communities, in the built environment, we could use some work there. We don't have the kind of decent thresholds that we should have in the communities. We've also had other people giving us input. I'm not going to quote anybody verbatim, but it's sort of like, well, since COVID, it seems like we have a lot more violations of sign standards and people doing things that, you know, during COVID, we let people do some things on outdoor dining and the beaches and things that, because we wanted to get people out of the buildings. But now that stuff needs to be, you know, it's not something that's permitted permanently and other things like that. So needless to say, the board heard that and said, yes, we'd like you to work on that, but that's a huge topic. What are community design standards? And what are the processes associated with that? So we suggested, and partly because Karen said, there's no way my staff can do that and finish the housing work. Let's spend this year getting a report ready for the board that says, what standards are we lacking in, or could we improve in? Which standards do we not need to deal with? And the process associated with those. So that's what I kind of want to go through. Next slide. I can probably skip. I'm going to go through what are community design standards, some options for process, give you a schedule, tell you who our staff team is, and then questions, discussion, and there's a motion for you all to say, yeah, I like this work program, or I want to change it a little bit, whatever. So that's what I'm going to do. So what are community design standards? And I stole this one from the city of Santa Barbara. It's like top picture, that's how an addition should look. Bottom picture, that's how it shouldn't look. What we did was we went to, you can find all kinds of ways to categorize what the community design standards are, but we went to a book called Planning and Urban Designs Standards put out by the American Planning Association. It's kind of like architectural graphic standards. If you know, if you're in architecture, you know they have that book. They have an engineering graphic standards book, I believe. So this is for urban design and planning. And so they have these categories listed under what are community design standards. So site design would be, where do you locate the building on the site? What kind of conditions do you have around the perimeter? How do you access it? Like, do you access it from certain roads or other roads? What kind of parking, loading, all of those things that, or how you lay out the site. What kind of plant materials are allowed, not allowed, those kind of things. How you want to orient your building. What kind of facades do you want on them? The bulk, dimensions of how much can it cover? How high can it be? Floor area ratios, those kind of things. What kind of signage? What kind of public spaces standards do you have? Do you have common bench heights, common signage in public spaces? And then of course, there's always the category of other for all the things that nobody's thought of, how they fit into one of these other categories. So that's what we're talking about, is looking at those things in those categories. Next slide. And then there's all kinds of options. There's trade-offs. Do you want to make a design standard something that requires discretionary approval, so the applicant doesn't know exactly what standard they're going to be told to live by staff or by a hearings officer or by a planning commission or by an elected body or governing body? So do you want discretion? Do you want certainty? Which ones do you want that on? You can understand why somebody who's doing applications would like to be able to get a piece of paper that says, this is what I got to do. I did it. So, I'm good. How prescriptive do you want to be? Do you want to get down to, it's got to be exactly this way? Or do you want to say, these are the concepts, we want mountain style architecture, but we're not going to tell you it has to have this roof pitch, these kind of windows, this kind of siding, etc. There's a trade-off between how expensive these things are to meet versus what the market will bear, and particularly if we're trying to do affordable housing. And then there's the regional local trade-off. How much of this do you want the local governments to do? How much do you want it to be in TRPA's code? And then how broad or specific do you want it to? Do you want it to apply to everything? Only housing, only certain in town centers, whatever. And then there's trade-off between, is it simple, which means staff can do it fairly easily, or is it complex and resource intensive and we have to hire somebody to do, like Garth, to do a detailed analysis of things, natural features, or a scenic assessment or simulations, all that sort of thing. Bless you. And then do we have a particular aesthetic we're after? Do we want everything to look like the DL Bliss stuff, or is it more general? Do we allow deviations? Are we rigid? And how easy is it to change these standards? Is it going to require going through a code amendment and an EIS and that sort of thing, or is it something we can change fairly easily? So those are the options that we will present to you along with those topics that we just talked about. Next slide. So here's our proposed work plan. Again, shooting for April to have a recommendation from this body to the governing board on what to work on in 27, 28 and going forward. Is today we're step one, approve this work plan. Step three, we want to do an inventory of what TRPA and local government standards are now using those categories. So we would anticipate saying, here's what each jurisdiction has, here's what TRPA has. We want to benchmark. There's about half a dozen communities that have been recommended to us, like Park City, Truckee, looking at Cape Cod Commission because it's a regional agency. I can't remember them all, but we have an intern who's a law school intern who, I don't know how Graham allowed us to use his intern for this, but she's interested in doing this, and hopefully she can come back to you next month and present what she's found from these select communities. And part of the objective, to be blunt, is her internship ends in August, and we would love to see her be able to walk away with a staff report presentation and PowerPoint under her belt. But it also helps us set up then step 4, which is to assess that inventory or that benchmark of selected communities against our inventory, and say, come to you all and say, okay, here's what Park City has that we don't. And does anybody think we should do that? Or here's some things that we have that others don't. Should we remove ours? Whatever kind of. And we've got 3 months in there because we think that's going to be an ongoing dialogue with you all. And then another 2 months to develop recommendations to the board, because it's a big topic in term, the topics and the process together. That's a lot. And we just thought if we just jumped right in and said, okay, let's start working on standards, we would just be tilting at windmills, so to speak. So that's kind of what we're proposing as the work plan. Paul Nielsen will be heading it up. We have 2 people from long range planning assigned to the project, Jacob and Kaylee. I don't know if you know Kaylee. I know you know Jacob. We have a new person, Stephanie, in permitting, who has worked in architecture. And we have our legal intern that we talked about. So that's kind of the team that will be coming back and doing this. And that's the objective. Is you all, among others, brought up the need to revisit design standards in our communities, not so much the scenic stuff that's, from the water or the scenic points on the travel ways. But so that's what we're proposing. And that's what I'm asking for you all to approve.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's a lot to consider there. This is a tough topic. Anytime we try to tell communities what we think they should look like, it gets really interesting. So yeah, this should be challenging and exciting.
And Brad's smile is like scary.
Brad knows about this stuff, that's for sure. And our communities do need to look a little better, I think, in this basin. We owe it to Tahoe to look a little better. Mr. Teixeira has his hand up first, and then we'll go to you, Mr. Swenson. So how about we go to you, Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and for the record, Steve Teixeira. So appreciate the presentation, John. I see the summary, and that's, I guess, what you're asking this body to approve today, but it lacks a lot of detail, like which tasks under which of these topics, and how would the staff folks that you described support the efforts of the APC to take this on. And then there's no particular, it doesn't appear in the summary anyway, probably in people's heads it exists, but would this happen during normal APC meetings? Would it be something in addition to regular meetings? What's the public feedback loop process, which, has the potential to extend the time frame, understandably so. So there's a lot of, I sit here as a member of this APC group and I'm going, am I just, approving that summary? Is that all I have to go on? Because that's a summary that really masks, not intentionally, but, it masks the amount of work that you and the governing board are asking us to take on. And we have a few assignments already. So I'm just a little nervous about, approving something like that today without a lot more information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good question, Steve. Yeah, John, if you have.
Look at the bottom of page 107, approval of the work plan. Obviously, we're here today for you to do that. The inventory would come back in August. The benchmark, not the inventory, the benchmark would come back to you in August. The assessment and inventory would come back to you in October. And then every one of these steps, you all are going to get presented and then have to make a recommendation on. So every one of your meetings is a public meeting. Again, we're just really, Steve, trying to get you all to recommend what we focus on, not actually do any changes to standards. So I think having each one of these 6 steps come to you, and I think that's listed on a 107, 108. And then step 3, step 4, and step 5 specifically say that we will be coming to you, if I recall right, and when they will. Who will be making which presentations besides the one I mentioned from the intern? I think that will leave that to Paul as the head of the project. And I hope that answers your question. It's, again, we're not changing any standards or changing any processes, but I think this is the right venue with the local government reps here to really hash this out and take it to the governing board next April and say, this is what we think as the APC with the local government representatives, having discussed it in public meetings. This is what we think you ought to direct staff to work on. Graham?
Mr. Chairman, just a quick follow-up. So would it be during regular APC meetings, you would set aside some time during each meeting to work on this as opposed to separate meetings? Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I look forward to hearing what my colleagues have to say about it, because this is like a big fish we're trying to land in a very small boat.
This is Graham St. Michelle. For the record, I think just to dovetail on to what John said, I think what it is, it will be largely a staff-led effort, but we're sort of just letting APC know, I think, that we would like to use the APC as a forum to develop this and bring forth recommendations. I think it wouldn't be a brand new additional, I don't think we're envisioning like a new APC being involved in subcommittees or like additional process or anything like that, but to just continue to use the APC forum to work with you guys, recognizing that, you're probably the best, first reviewers of a lot of these types of proposals that might come through. And I think some of that the time matrix, all of that is of course subject to change as well, I guess, but.
Yeah, what Graham said is right. Again, we're just trying to say, what should we focus on? And I can't think of a better group in the region here to get together and say, this is what we should focus on. And this is the processes. I'm just going to channel Crystal here. It's like, well, we have those standards. Why do we need you to do those in certain areas? In other areas, they may say, we don't have those standards. And it's best done at the regional level, or it's best done at the local level. And it needs to be, outcome oriented, like form-based code, or it needs to be very specific. It's not in coming up with any of the standards or coming up with any of the processes, but recommending which ones we start working on. I hope that more than answers Steve's question.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, I think you'll hear some more input here. I'm getting it though. How about we go to you, Harry, and then I bet Crystal and Hitch have some things.
I agree with Steve. That's Harry Swenson. This seems small and looks like it can grow really big, and that's why I think Steve was concerned. I'm also concerned, unless what you were telling me that each of these segments are key performance indicators to say go on or stop, go back and do something better, or if that's the approach you're using, that makes some sense to me, especially at a small level, because I get concerned that community standards are broad and wide and non-existent. So we're going from, broad and wide in certain areas to then recommendations to non-existent. There's going to be significant risk. And I think that's another big fish that might end up in the boat or whatever. So that would be my concern in general. Looks reasonable, for a small level, but I'm worried, the outcomes, recommendations and approvals don't make, I mean, I think this is a small study that if we get to recommendations other than what are already there, we've codified them, and then quickly applying them to the broad range of everybody else that doesn't have them would be a major concern on my part.
Yeah, let me not to get biblical here, but I think what we're asking you to tell the board is you should probably cast your net over here. We're not going to do it for you. We're not going to haul in the fish or the big fish or the net full of fish. But I think what we're really trying to say is, okay, we've done an inventory. I'm just going to pick one, say facade. What are the facade standards for buildings? We may pick that one and say, you know, Placer has this, South Lake Tahoe has this, Douglas County doesn't, Washoe does, so forth. And we think it's fine. We think there's enough there. Don't focus on that. We may pick another one like the entrances to parcels from highways. We think we ought to work on maybe, could we change this to coming up with some standards for shared driveways or moving accesses to projects off of the US and state highways and moving them to a street on the back. Okay, you ought to work on that, but I'm not saying you come up with a solution there for either one of those. I'm just saying you say and then next April, you say to the board, we think you ought to work on this, you ought to not work on that. And the basis for it is, we've looked at all the inventory. I don't think everybody here knows what everybody else has. I know I don't. And I think based on looking at what everybody has and based on what the process would add to some types of projects, if you changed it, we may not want to add any discretionary processes. We may want to take some things that are discretionary and make them administrative. So but I don't think you're going to say which ones are. I think you're just going to say, look at that process, look at that design standard. So I don't think it could be big if we went beyond that, but I think right now it's like, just what do we want to look at? It's kind of like narrowing. It's kind of like a broad range telescope, and we say, oh, it looks like there's something over here. Let's focus in on that. Kind of a mixed scanning model.
All right. Good. Crystal?
Yeah, thank you, Crystal Jacobson, for the record. I agree, it could get really big. So, and you know, thinking, my first thought is, you know, if it's not working, or if it is working well, don't fix, you know, why are we fixing something that's not broken, right? So, I think that you sort of answer that, right? That we would first look to see, like, where are the areas that perhaps there should be some focus on. But I think from a local government's perspective, it's what is the, well, number one, involvement from the local government, right? But two, implications to the local government work plan, right? Like what we're doing. And it always ends up being, you know, updates to our plan, right? And code. And so how does that align with our work plan that we're doing? So I think an assessment of what's working and what's not, it seems reasonable to me. And then looking at that and then, you know, deciding whether or not some of them are doable or, so I think that, yeah, I think what you just described makes sense to me, but anything beyond that, I think it would probably need a further discussion for sure.
Yeah, and this maybe also will help with Harry's question. It may be that we have plenty of standards there and and the review process is right, and we don't do enforcement. And that doesn't require anything other than saying, hey, local government X, you need to start enforcing your own code. That may be all it is. So I'm not looking for any suggestion from this group on what the standard ought to be or what the process ought to be, but that these are the ones you ought to look at. And these are the ones you leave alone. Because I don't know where else we would start to work on this.
Yeah, I mean, sorry. one more thing, just like think about parking, for example, like that might be, they're focusing so much on parking management plans, and Placer has noticed that, that as we move into that arena of managing parking countywide for us, there needs to be more flexibility with parking standards. So that could be, that might be an area, right? That seems reasonable to kind of focus on. So yeah, I get that.
And to help clarify what I would envision if, say, the group said we need to look at parking standards, and parking standards more specifically, how many spaces are required. That's all you would say. We aren't saying what the requirement should be, or that there should be none, or should be maximums or minimums, just we need to look at it.
Good. We're getting there. I think Hitch and then Garth, and then we're gonna go online. I see Hope, Jennifer, we have Hope and Eric as well. So get ready, John.
Thank you. For the record, John Hitchcock. I definitely agree with Mr. Jacobson. I mean, our concern is that, what the implication of this is to the local jurisdictions. Obviously, that's one of our major concerns. And at the end of the day, is this gonna require us to go back and amend our area plans and our standards? One of my other questions is how will the local jurisdictions be involved in this process, in particular in steps 3 and 4, where you're benchmarking the communities, how those are selected? Are the local jurisdictions going to be involved in that process at all? And then also actually an assessment of itself? Or is this something that's going to be internally done by TRPA and then basically presented to APC and to local jurisdictions? You did bring up a comment that it's potentially one of the recommendations may come out is that, local jurisdictions, maybe you just need to do a better job enforcing your standards. That said, you may get pushback from local jurisdictions saying we did enforce our standards. However, we just disagree with your assessment that, whether you like it or not, sometimes beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And so you need to take that in consideration. And then also I brought this up, I think, during the threshold discussions on scenic, is that, we're in a zone that we have to deal with fire risks, high severity zone, and that kind of somewhat also impacts the type of design, the development design standards that we're going to be promoting in the future. And as for many years working at TRPA, we always talked about, we want our standards to reflect the natural environment, to have used natural materials. But in light of where we are today, that may not even be feasible or even possible. And it's just something I think is part of this process. You need to take that into account of the reality on the ground that, we're in a high fire severity zone. So those are just some of the comments from at least our perspectives from the city.
I think most of those are the things that will be in the recommendations coming from you. We may as staff bring a recommendation to you and you go, no, we disagree. We want to change it to this. You guys are the ones. It will be a recommendation from the APC to the governing board, not from staff to the governing board. And we talk to APC because in terms of like the inventories and assessments and all that, I don't know how we could not do an inventory. I don't know how we could do an inventory of your standards without you telling us what they are. And when we compare them across jurisdictions into what we have, we'll bring that to you and you go, no, that's not right. You guys are the ones who are the subject matter experts here. We probably know the TRPA code better than most, maybe not you, John, but better than most, but it's going to come here for you guys to say that's accurate and we agree, or here's some inaccuracies, or here's where we don't agree. I'm not presupposing that we'll say you got to have more standards at the local government level. It may be something you say, hey, that's a shore zone standard. We want you to apply that region wide. That TRPA, that's your baby. So I don't know what they're going to be. I just trying to lay out a process for us focusing on what it should be, partly because you guys said we need to do this.
Okay, good comments, Hitch. Paul.
Yeah, Paul Nielsen, TRPA. Just listening in the back of the room. I wanted to
just let John know that, in terms of the benchmark, other jurisdictions we're looking at, cities, counties, towns, we'll show you what we've looked at. And if you think we need to expand on that, we can do that. It'll just be an initial sort of look and a disclosure at, what we found. But if you think there's other communities out there, then, we see this, I see this, I'll be taking on the lead of this project as an iterative process. So we want to hear from you. And we can slow the train down, do more research, come back to you. The schedule that's before you is a target, right? It's a target. And so if we need to do more research, come back with you, again, we're going to do the heavy lifting here. We don't want to put a burden on the local jurisdictions. We can do that. So I see this as really iterative and looking for feedback at every step of the way.
Good. That's
And,
helpful.
and it may be, if, like Paul said, if we don't meet the target, next year's board retreat, we'll do it the following year. But it's us trying to be responsive to partly you all saying, we need some standards, some better standards and better thresholds in the communities. Or another way to put it is the built environment doesn't match the beauty of the natural environment.
It's true, unfortunately. Yeah. Garth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Garth Alling for the record. Paul, I think you read my mind when you were sitting in the back of the room, because I was going to request that you come up and sort of give us your opinion on how you're going to be driving this ship here. I think thank you, John, for the big overview of everything, but really the devil's in the details. And Paul, with your experience with TRPA and everything, do you have any preconceived notions on what sort of areas you think you'd like to focus on? I know you don't have the inventory yet, but what are your sort of ideas of things that potentially could stand out first and foremost?
Thanks, Garth. To answer your question directly, I think communication between the local jurisdictions and the project proponents. I think early on in the process, so that we can disclose to project proponents, what the TRPA standards are and guidelines, right? You got standards and guidelines. And getting the local jurisdictions to participate in those discussions early on, I think is going to be something that we want to talk about. What is that process that occurs today? Is it adequate? Could it be strengthened? Is one of the conversations I'm looking forward to having, because sometimes in these projects, as late hits are not something that helps the process be predictable. When folks are down the road looking at, a permit timeline and they've developed plans, it's hard for them to take a step back, right? And maybe incorporate some standards that they didn't adequately incorporate into the project, or maybe they misunderstood how it's applied both at the local level and the regional level. So to answer your question, Garth, I think the process in disclosing to project applicants what is expected of them early in the process is going to be an important discussion.
Yeah, thank you. And it also made me feel a little better hearing that you're saying that this is just a target in terms of the timeline. I think that's a very aggressive target due to the amount of standards and things that you and this board is going to be looking at. I see it being a lot longer than what's here in this work plan.
Yeah, just clarify one more point. We have a lot of documents that we deal with at the local level, regional level. It goes back to the community plans that were developed after, the 87 regional plan was adopted. Andrew Strain was involved in those. There's a lot of standards out there. There's a lot of guidelines out there. And so there's a huge body of evidence that we'll be presenting to you. And so I don't see this as a deep dive into creating new standards like John Hester mentioned. I think you're going to see that it's more about coordination, how they're applied, and maybe refining some. So let us do that heavy lifting and bring that forward to you so we can show you what the body of evidence is, which is quite large.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Garth. Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer Carr. Thank you for that last point, because that's, as I was thinking of it, as it's a scoping project, really, more than anything. And collecting information is great. Compiling it all in one place is great. And then deciding what to do with that once you have all the information is the only way to approach it, because you do have to take smaller bites, and scoping sounds appropriate. And the way it's been described to me, feels like it would work, having also, worked on the two-swig, which has outside meetings. This one doesn't sound like it'll have that. That sounds great. And I like the approach that you're taking. I would offer that it might be worthwhile to spend a little time looking at what we do have as examples of things that we like. Like there's a particular restaurant at the bottom of Ski Run that doesn't have golden arches at the top of an 80-foot pole, right? It has an appropriately aesthetic sign. And I think that with other facades and materials, I think and things that are going well in the local jurisdictions, I think would be really nice to showcase and help to bring to the forefront as things that are really going well, as sort of the baseline for maybe where some mid-course corrections need to be done in other areas. I would also suggest that it's painful. I'm going through it right myself right now, but sometimes there are things that we have not enforced or not enforced fully, or just need to come back to. If there has been sort of COVID creep or whatever you want to call it, where things maybe got a little lax for a while, and we just need to do outreach potentially to let those folks know that we're not going to come pounding on your door right now, but there's a day coming when we need to bring things back into the standards that we all thought were good at the time. And if we still agree with them, what we want to, potentially enforce and get back to, if they weren't grandfathered in from some prior other activity, but it's just kind of crept on its own. How do we rein that back in? And that is enforcement of the code. But when we have to do that at the state level as well, we do a lot of outreach of and just signaling what we're doing so nobody's surprised, because nobody likes surprises. I would offer a third point, if you haven't thought of it, as far as aesthetic standards, you might want to look at Stowe, Vermont. It's a mountain town community that might have some relevant aesthetics and things that you might want to look at for community design. You mentioned Park City and a few others, but that's another one that has sort of a Tahoe feel to it. And then my last item is just a question procedurally. We don't normally, or we often don't have an August meeting because of the summit. Are we actively ensuring that we're actually going to have an August meeting this time around? And I just wanted to put that out there as a traditional pattern, but if you're targeting the August meeting for the intern, I just wanted to, yeah, thank you.
She offered to come back from school. So maybe we could see if she could do that later if that works better. But we were trying to give her a meaningful package to leave her internship with, but that's not, hard, set in concrete.
There might be another reason to have an August meeting though, because it's our last meeting with John. Oh, you will? Oh, shoot. Okay. Never mind. Sorry to scare everyone. Keep them around. Yeah. Jennifer.
I mean, I would just say, yeah, I think we will discuss that. I think there's no, no hard and fast need to Tula as the intern to do that just for the presentation, but we'll discuss that internally.
Yeah, we'll make sure we have a good meeting agenda if we're going to pull all of us together. Your comments made me think of the 20-foot tall inflatable Corona can I just saw in front of the tap room on my way here. That was something to see. Yeah, like, oh, interesting
that's
design
that's
standard
COVID creep,
choice.
if you want to call it that. Is there?
Yeah, I hope so. Let's go online and do Hope Sullivan, and then we'll go to you, Mr. Young, and then we'll come back to the room. So go ahead, Hope.
Thank you, Hope Sullivan. John Hester, I appreciated your comments as you introduced this topic because you put an emphasis on the local communities. And Paul, I'm glad you're involved because you go way back. And I'm remembering when you all used to have meetings with the local communities to kind of get our input directly. And I'm going to suggest that this is a good candidate to do that, recognizing the board's assigned the responsibility to APC. I think separate from APC, if the folks on the TRPA staff working on this could have meetings, and I would suggest with all of us in the room at the same time, so that we can have a dialogue and identify for you all what our communities are doing, what the challenges are in our communities, and what we think will work in our communities, because we're right there on the front lines. So I suggest those supplemental meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Hope. Mr. Young?
Hi, I appreciate this discussion. I also see this as a scoping effort, and I think it should be framed and I think it should be approached that way as a year-long scoping effort. I appreciate a lot of input into scoping before a project. And I think that we should do this. I think we are the appropriate people to do that scoping. I think that the angst that has been uncovered here today, obviously by this subject, really has to do with what comes next. What will that scope say, and where will it lead us? In particular, what kind of work will it put onto the local jurisdictions? So I appreciate the subject. But to be honest here, over the past year, I don't really remember this rising to the top like this. I don't remember this being a constant and important point of discussion. What I do remember coming up multiple times throughout the year when we were asked, and input by myself as well as multiple other APC members, was that we would appreciate a stronger definition between local and regional. And we had that discussion many times. What is the regional role here? And is there any opportunity to do a better job in the mixing of local and regional responsibilities? I remember that being a discussion on many points throughout the year. And that's what this really raises in my mind again, is another work plan by TRPA to dive into local development codes. And if that, the governing board has decided this is important, so it's going to happen. I appreciate the year-long scoping effort. If this effort can, if one of the results of this effort can somehow be a de-blurring of the lines between local and regional responsibility, that would be a great outcome for Washoe County. And we would appreciate that. I think we are the appropriate board. I look forward to the scoping. I greatly look forward to the discussion. I can tell you, until I get different direction, Washoe County feels that community design standards are a local issue. And we are frustrated by the blurring of those standards between TRPA and the local jurisdiction, and who's responsible and who is allowed to make a new community design standard. So that is frustrating for us. We see that as a local issue. Until I get different direction, Washoe County's viewpoint is that when you cross from Incline into Crystal Bay, you should know it. When you cross from Crystal Bay into Kings Beach, you should know it. When you drive and you cross into Tahoe City, you should know it. When you get to Homewood, you should know it. They should all be different from each other. They should represent their own local jurisdictions in the way that those local jurisdictions believe best represents the Tahoe Basin. So, these are not anti-TRPA comments, but they're not. But I really appreciate this. This could be extremely helpful to all of us. A look at what we're doing and understanding what other people are doing is always an appreciated effort. If the outcome were more of a toolkit, a working toolkit for everybody to use and to look and to operate with if they chose to, or if they wanted to, or if they were convinced to. At this point, Washoe County would be more comfortable with that. If at the end of this scoping effort, the next work plan is to develop a series of code changes or design standards, which then the local jurisdictions have to fit into their local work plans and have to amend their area plans and have to amend their development codes to enable those things, that may be problematic for us. And so I'm really looking forward to this scoping project. I think that in the years ahead, Tahoe may look much better for it. But I remember over the past year a stronger desire by this board to better define local and regional, more than I remember a desire for TRPA to launch into community design standard. Thank you for listening to me once again.
Thank you, Eric. Good comments. Brad and then Harry.
Thanks, Paul and John. Brad Altman for the record. This is a gigantic thing that you're kind of pulling the cover off of here. I think I'm in a bit of a unique position as someone that's actually designed stuff and presented to various design review committees around the basin and in Truckee, including the fact that my business partner is on the Tahoe City Design Review Committee. So we've like literally been on both sides of that table and had to recuse ourselves or herself from various things. I appreciate the clarity from John and Paul that this is a scoping effort that, Jennifer talked about, and I'm comfortable with that. But I really appreciate the comments that Eric just made about the aesthetic diversity of knowing that you're in different communities. And if you look at other communities, like, you mentioned Park City and, a whole bunch of others, from Vermont even, that's okay. And you might learn the good, the bad, and the ugly that what they've done. But I want to make sure that this group has their eye on the fact that, are you talking about new development, redevelopment? Because there's not new development happening. What you first have, and hopefully this isn't offensive, but you have a gigantic amount of urban blight. Okay. And you're not going to cure urban blight by creating more standards, because you only have the opportunity to fix that urban blight if someone comes to the table with a project. And nobody's coming to the table with a project because it is such a horrendous process to deal with. Nobody wants to do it. And the reason you get signs, maybe the Coors Light thing notwithstanding or whatever it is, but signs on new restaurants, whatever, because it is such a nightmare. People are like, we're going to design what we think is a nice sign. We're going to put it up and see what happens. And I have sat in design review committee meetings and watched people pick apart such nuance. You're there like for 4 or 5 hours. It's insulting, it's degrading, and it's not helpful. Like people questioning, I've literally seen people question the competency of the contractor, which is not part of their purview, right? It's not part of our purview. And I think you could really again, I'm comfortable with this from a scoping standpoint, but I don't want our community to look like Park City. I was just in Vail. I was just in Leadville, Colorado. I was just in like the Boulder area, Longmont, a lot of these places that have these mountain things. We're a unique place, and each of these communities, again, I think Eric put it really well. You have to be careful with like what the town of Truckee did. There was someone that said at the town of Truckee, if the new house in Gray's Crossing looks like grocery outlet, maybe you kind of messed up your architectural design standards because everything looks the same. And it's going to be exactly the problem you have with when they logged, for the Comstock, and now all the trees are the same age, you're the exact same problem. So we really need to be thoughtful that this is just scoping. The devil's in the details of this, like, people have said, but that blight, like, let's start with that. Like, what are you doing with, when I drove here and drove, from Tahoe City all the way here through all of this stuff, like, that's what we want, but that's what we got. And if you're focused on new development, that's not going to happen because these old mom and pop places, these people don't have any money. Maybe it's second generation they inherited. They're land rich, but cash poor. They don't have the money to hire me. They don't have the money to actually do any of these things. It's not going to happen. So, let's just, and, kind of to Crystal's point, and John Hitchcock's point too, is this a taxation without representation thing where TRPA comes through with all of these things and then all of a sudden Placer County is forced to like revamp all these other stuff to try to align, and whether it's Placer and Washoe and Douglas and El Dorado and the city of South Lake Tahoe. I mean, I think it could be really, really challenging. And like, who decides what these benchmarks are? Because that's a really subjective thing. So, and it just, and it comes down to the permitting too, like we talked about in one of your slides, like access. I'm dealing with that right now. This is a very concrete example where Placer County said, well, okay, or not Placer County, but the design review committee said, okay, well, we like what you're doing here. It's a corner lot. One's on more of a main street. It's a public way, but it's privately maintained. And it's like 10 to 12 feet wide. And the fire department said, okay, well, if you're going to do that, we'll agree to that, but you have to make it 20 feet wide and you have to make it a fire apparatus access road, meaning the Appendix D requirements. It's like, okay, great. Well, guess what that means? We have to get a linear public facility improvement. You know how long that takes? A long time. I've dealt with Paul on this and he's been great, but you have to essentially get a site assessment, land class verification, all this stuff. Like, now your project is like a year out. And so all of these things, like, they sound good, but again, just like, let's keep it to scoping and look at the stuff. I'm super excited to look at what all these other mountain communities are doing, or beach communities for that matter, tourist destination communities. But we have to be careful.
I don't know if you want to respond to that, but I agree with a lot of what you just said. And
Yeah.
Jennifer, I wish I'd put the word scoping on the staff report, because that's really what it is. Just to share war stories, I was the director in Washoe County and we had a design review committee. And then I was director in Reno and we talked about what happened at Washoe and said, we don't want a design review committee, because in Washoe, we had architects on the committee arguing with architects presenting projects and saying, your design's bad. No, it's not, it's good. It's like, we all know design is so subjective. So process, what you guys say you want to look at scope wise is going to be very important. And to give a little bit of a longer arc of time over this, for those who weren't involved in the 2012 regional plan amendments, the locals argued successfully that we should be able to do these plans that we adopt ourselves if they fit within the regional plan, and including design standards, including, all the stuff in the development code. And we should be able to permit projects ourselves through these MOUs up to a certain size. And I was in the negotiations. It was a fight between the statewide representatives, particularly from California, and the local governments from both states saying, we want to do this. And they were saying, okay, well, if you want to do that, then we audit you and there's a certain size and you have to be consistent with the regional plan. But the arc of this is that more and more is getting delegated to the local governments. You know, to Eric's question, the bi-state compact's clear. TRPA can require a permit for everything and come up with design standards for everything. We're not. We're trying to do it with the local governments, and I think that's the trend line where this is going. But I think that's why we're here with you guys saying, let's scope this. You know, what do we all agree is working well, and what are the good examples, as Jennifer said. So I think, you know, from my perspective, and I think Paul's too, we want to come up with something that works better for the region, not better for TRPA at the expense of local governments or vice versa.
Yeah, Brad, I just want to acknowledge your comments. We have worked on a lot of projects together, and it's great that you're on the APC. You know, I think that this is a work plan, this is scoping, and you know what my goal here is predictability in the process, inserting some of that so there can be some certainty on the other side of the table. And that, yeah, you said devil is in the details. I want to say predictability is in the details. And so I'm looking forward to hearing from you and your partners, your experiences and how we can learn from that. We can inform this project by those experiences and bring that predictability, you know, into whatever we deliver as a part of this sort of collective effort.
Yeah, thanks, Paul and Brad. Good comments. I think a lot of us might share that sentiment. Harry, and then we can go to Robert.
Harry Swanson here again, and I agree with basically a lot of the comments and concerns raised here. I was then thinking about what was the rationale for doing this, and then I reread the document as we were talking, and it says, oh, it came from us. So whoever it came from, does this solve your problem that you were trying to deal with? Simple, because I'm new here, and I didn't really understand fully the problem, other than we all know each community, the standards, especially in community standards, are community driven and broad and wide, and as Mr. Young said, you know, you're driving, you want to know where you are on the lake, and I pretty much do by recognizing the buildings I'm in. So just a thought on that, but I'm hoping somebody could say, yes, this is kind of the problem I wanted to be solved.
I could probably take some responsibility for it. I do beat the we do an amazing job on the environment, but the built environment continues to suffer drum. I beat that drum a lot. Because I live in South Lake Tahoe, and it is urban blight. And like when people visit me, they go, wow, this isn't what I pictured Tahoe to look like. Yeah. I mean, I hear that with everyone that comes, and I'm always like, yeah, let's just go. We'll walk beyond all this into the woods. It's going to be great. Just hold on a second. So yes, maybe I can take some responsibility. I'm pleased that this has raised to this issue. I like the idea of framing it as a scoping project. I think that's been nice to hear that we can look at it that way. You know, I really want to look at the why, you know, like why aren't things being redeveloped? Is it just these are inherited properties and everyone's land rich and cash poor, right? Is that the reason? Are the rules messed up? Is it way too complicated? What is it? Is it TRPA? Is it the locals? I know there's confusion because we have the TRPA overlay in this basin. It creates huge confusion for people. And we talk about it all the time. Are you permitting this project? Are we permitting this project? Are both of us permitting this project? Where is this in the MOU? Applicants get caught, they get frustrated. So the more we can continue to provide predictability and cut that whole piece out of the equation, like here's your pathway towards achieving the goal that you want on your property, and we want to help you. That's, I think, what we're all looking for. Mechanically, how does all that work? Of course, yeah, the devil's in the details. And that's going to take time. This is not a 6-month fix by any means. So we probably have a long way to go, but the 1,000-mile journey starts with one step, right? So let's start and see where it takes us. And I'm excited to do it. So I think, thanks for that question, Harry. I'll take some responsibility on that. And probably others too. I know Garth talks about that a lot. And others that live here and see this stuff every day and go, ee. So anyway, Robert.
Just building on the various comments that you don't want all the communities to look the same. Just when looking at you've got to task the benchmark select communities. I think John Hester mentioned something in Cape Cod. So if there's any regional areas you can look at, I don't know if there are any, but that can would help acknowledge the differences between the communities in a regional area. That'd be good to look at for benchmarks. Thanks.
Thanks, Robert. Let's see, Steve Teixeira, I see your hand up.
Yeah, that's good. I'd rather hear from Kate right now.
Okay, let's go to you, Kate.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. My video for some reason is not cooperating, but thank you, Steve. I really appreciate all the comments, and I do agree, right? Local jurisdictions, we have to be able to sit down at the table and come up with some common sense, design standards that works for all of us individually. We are currently Douglas County working on the Tahoe Douglas area plan. We have a new owner of an area within that Tahoe Douglas area plan that is trying to redevelop the area and come up with some new signage. They're real sharp looking, but we've run into stringent design standards, sign standards that aren't allowed. So I've already started working with TRPA and I appreciate the cooperation. I've worked with Paul on several projects, so I know the cooperation is there and we'll find some common ground, because if you look at some of the sign standards, they're outdated, a lot of it, because nowadays you can, these companies can create some really cool looking signs that don't fit into the box of what a traditional sign used to look like and how big they can be. They're adding features to the signs and anyway, but I anticipate the cooperation and I do think TRPA, hears us from local jurisdiction standpoint. I know they've worked extensively with us. We've had staffing issues. I just had our senior planner retire. So every time we take 2 steps forward, I feel like we have a step backwards, but I appreciate the cooperation and anticipate, I think Hope had a great suggestion, sitting down at the table with us and trying to find some common ground. So I do appreciate all the efforts and all the comments too. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Steve, did you want to jump back in?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve Chair for the record. I really appreciate all the sharing, of course, and particularly what Mr. Altman had to say, because he does live that, and several of you do. The reasons why people are not pursuing projects, and that we could set all kinds of design standards and have expectations that people are going to do X, Y, or Z, make our community look better, cooperation between TRPA and the local governments. But, what would make the process more interesting for me as one person would be hearing from some of the people as to why they are abandoning their project or why they decided not to pursue, particularly if you look at projects in high visibility areas. I mean, Tahoe City is a great example. We've had several really good projects proposed, and really none of them are moving forward. And why is that? And, the same with Kings Beach. And there are other areas around the lake. Kate just talked about one in Douglas County. But, why is it that people are not going forward with projects? That would make this process for me, and I think a lot more interesting and a lot more valuable. And then you're engaging people, and we don't want to turn it into I want to be cranky about everything at Tahoe kind of session, but if we really want to find out why certain projects that a lot of input has gone into and a lot of shaping from local agencies and TRPA, and they're not happening. You see a number of projects around the region where a project got approved and there's a for sale sign on it now because the owner said, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm not going to deal with all the mitigation measures or whatever the case may be. And financing is tough right now. But that would, I definitely support adding the word scoping to whatever we do. But, let's get some real world examples of why some of the things that, people have designed in partnership with local government TRPA aren't happening.
Good suggestion. Thanks. Brad? And then we're going to go to public comment quickly, and then we're going to try to make this motion.
Brad Altman for the record. Thanks, Steve, for your comment. I don't know if it's appropriate to add this or ask this, but I really think it would be valuable for this committee to do some investigation or ask, maybe there's an intern or somebody to help, like, truly, why are these projects not moving forward? As Steve mentioned, there's several in Tahoe City. Without going into detail, I just got a text message from a finance person for one of them, wanting to talk to me about it. But it's a problem, and you can do all of this design stuff and scoping and feel good about ourselves. But if no one's going to execute that, and so, I mean, I can speak from Crystal, on the Placer County Tahoe City side. I'm sure Brendan and John and, all these other folks from the other counties can speak to it as well. But is it just financing? Is it just regulatory? I think it'd be worth, maybe that's a separate motion, whatever task item, but I think it'd be good for this committee to look into why that's happening. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Again, I want to make sure that the COVID scope creep doesn't evolve into, an analysis of redevelopment incentives that we're offering. We certainly want to hear public comment, and I think we can incorporate that in. I would also suggest that we incorporate in some project proponents who have gotten projects done. I was just in a meeting yesterday where a project at the Y, Aspen Acres, on that vacant property behind the Crossing Shopping Center, originally came up 3 years ago or so, was on hold, has been on hold, but it's come back. And the reason that one has come back is, and this is a deed restricted affordable housing project, workforce housing. The reason this project came back, and the Conservancy is directly involved with their land, is because of the phase 2 housing amendments that were approved, went through the APC, ultimately approved by the board, density and height. That's the reason that project came back. I think it's 90 plus units. It's significant. Big building, 4 stories. And so, I'd want to see both sides of the coin so we could learn from, efforts that were stalled and efforts that were successful.
That's a good suggestion. Crystal?
Yeah, Crystal Jacobson for the record, really quick. I just want to mention, kind of tag on to what you said, Brad. We have done, like, Placer's done studies on just what you asked for about the why behind projects being stalled out for years in some cases, right? And we do know a lot of it is cost, right? Just the cost to do business in the basin is way higher than it is outside of the basin. So we know that. A lot of it is a regulatory framework, right? You've got, like, 2 different agencies that most projects, any large project, has to go through. So I look forward to the process part that you mentioned, Paul, of, how can we work together in partnership to try to facilitate redevelopment, right? Like, the process is there that they've got, they have to go through certain permitting, but how can we work together to help sort of handhold people through that process? And I think that might be a good, one area of focus that could come out of this.
Good. Final thoughts before we go to public comment? Okay, let's do it. We're going to go to public comment. This is item 4C.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I had my hand up. Hope Sullivan.
Oh, shoot. Okay, go ahead, Hope.
Thank you. Just real quick. And I guess we'll, after public comment, we can talk more about it, but I'm just questioning whether we're prepared to make a motion or if this is something where the staff should come back to us with sort of more specificity, because I agree with what my colleagues at the local level said, that, and I've said already, that I really feel like there needs to be a strong focus on local government. I heard what Mr. Teixeira said about wanting to hear from developers, and Paul said that as well. And I feel like maybe we need more information about this work plan before there's a motion. So I'm just putting that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, let's see what the public comment says, and then let's see what our motion looks like. We can certainly amend the motion. But everyone can choose to vote how they wish, of course. So let's again go to public comment. This is item 4C. If you're online, please use the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or dial *9 on your telephone, and you'll be called upon and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. We have no members of the public in the room, so we don't need to go there. But for members of the public joining us via the webinar, now is your opportunity to comment on item 4C. And Catherine, I will turn this over to you to manage public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are no hands raised online to comment.
Okay, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission. What is our motion? What does our draft motion look like? Okay, here we go.
I would add, suggest you add two things. One is after the word standards, put scoping. So that it's clear we're just scoping. And then if you want to, in your, maybe not in your motion, but after that, this is your project. It's not going anywhere unless you guys say, we agree to move this recommendation on. So you can maybe, I wrote down 7 things that maybe 8 that we want to have built into this. And we don't know, we need to change the document, the staff report, but Stowe, Vermont is another place to benchmark. Pre-enforcement communication, something we need to do more of. Add good design examples, direct meetings with local government staffs. Call this scoping, which I think I've just talked about. We want to clarify the regional local roles. I think we want to clarify all roles, to be honest with you. Variation by community, and then I forgot that. I think that's just the ones I have. There may be something else.
Include good and bad examples. Yeah. Why are things moving forward? Why are things not moving forward?
That was number 8, is like ask some project proponents why it worked, they got investment or didn't. It's really investment.
Yeah. Why are they moving forward? Why are they not moving forward?
And Commissioner Ehrlich's recommendation is the other one I had, making sure that we look at hopefully a regional entity that's got jurisdiction over locals, so we can see maybe how they approach it.
Yeah, I think we mentioned Cape Cod Commission because my understanding, they have 15 local governments in their jurisdiction. We can even go, if there's others, as we bring this stuff back, if there's others, you say, well, I know about, I don't know, make up someplace that I know the Santa Fe area has some design standards in the county and city, blah, blah, blah. Go look at that. We can, it's, you guys are driving this thing.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this motion is, obviously, this is a very simple, broad motion. It's like, let's get started. We can append onto this motion and, make sure that the effort contains the list that we've just talked about, so that we, to Hope's point, maybe we have a little more certainty and specificity in sort of where we're headed and what we expect will be looked at and discussed with us as we continue to move. I personally don't see, a reason to delay making this motion right now for another meeting to bring something back. I think we've had a really robust and thorough discussion here. And we sort of have our expectations that we've laid out, and I think you've shared from your side of the table. So I'm feeling comfortable. But I see Steve has his hand up and Mr. Ehrlich has his light on. So Steve, let's go to you and then we'll go to Robert.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, Steve DeShera, I'm not quite as comfortable as you are on this. I tend to agree with Hope's comments. I would be more comfortable. And, I don't mind helping to support a motion that directs staff to bring back the specificity or the issues that we talked about today and add it to the list. But I'm not comfortable in any different context to say, yeah, we're all in on this and we're moving forward. I do want something else to come back with more detail, more clarity, more specificity. So that's just where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Robert.
Robert Ehrlich. I'm wondering if we could approve the work plan with notation that modifications to that would be coming at the next meeting, the August meeting, something like that. And then one other idea to add to the list of kind of places to look at would be ones which have been sort of blighted or so and have improved. We've got a lot of the mountain communities. Some of them have been around a long time. Some of them are like Vail and not as old as some of like Tahoe. So ones where we have some sections that examples of places where there was improvement of old, not so attractive buildings. If you can come up with an example for that.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Kate, I see your hand up.
Yeah, the other thing we could do too is an added notation, because I'm comfortable, but I understand, I do feel like local jurisdictions, we just don't want to lose that voice. And maybe the notation here is it's approved, but we want a discussion, like the ad that there has to be conduct a meeting with all the local jurisdictions to discuss and go over any modifications to whatever we approve today, so that we're, on the record of this meeting's going to happen and we're all going to come to the table and have an opportunity to provide more feedback.
Yeah, I think we have good agreement on that. Do you want to chime in?
Yeah, we support those suggestions. I see this, as I said before, as an iterative process, and I imagine this won't be the last time that we modify the work program. Obviously, when you've got a scope, there's details behind it. These are some of the details that we can document for you at the next meeting. That's no problem. And I imagine we'll continue to do some of that throughout this process.
I would expect so. Ellery?
I heard from John Hester a really nice summary of the discussion that APC members brought to the table today. He was able to articulate them in 8 points. And I'm wondering if maybe we could move forward with this motion, but capture those summarized 8 points in the motion itself, and if people would be comfortable with that.
Okay.
It's actually grown to 10. But I would
between 8 and 10.
Yeah, I would just say this. Our next meeting may be September, not August, and I would like some sort of concurrence that we should start work on this thing, not wait 2 months to tweak the work plan, because we're creating a process to look at the process that's onerous as the processes we're trying to look at. So it's like I said, if you guys don't like what we're coming up with, it's not going anywhere. So if we haven't met with the local governments like you asked us to, somebody like Kate or Eric's going to say, or Hope, you haven't met with us yet. We're not ready to do this. I mean, I hope it doesn't have to get more complex than that, because this isn't like something we're adopting by ordinance or anything like that. It's trying to work on a project together. But I can list the 10 if you want to include them in the motion. That helps. I think we're just trying to get this thing going.
I think we can reference the list, or like to Robert's point, we could say we approve this and bring back, at the next
Put the
touch
10,
point, put them in the work plan,
put them in the minutes, and we won't approve the minutes till you get them, whatever.
something like that.
I mean, we trust each other or we don't. I
Yeah,
guess
do we trust John Hester? Of course we do.
Oh, Paul Gilson.
Paul, that's a different question. Yes.
To add, I mean, I think just to try to add a gloss on it too is context for the agency is, the APC is required to give recommendations on code amendments. That's always, and the fact of the matter is, if a recommendation on a code amendment from the APC is a vote of no, we just pass that information on to the governing board. It's not necessarily a prerequisite. I've kind of said that before. We always work through that process. I think what we're talking about here is, does APC want to be involved with staff on this effort or not? I mean, staff can go forward and do this work, whether it involves code amendments or not. If it does not involve code amendments, you may not hear anymore. You may not be involved if it's APC saying no, we don't want to be involved in this. This isn't a requirement for the agency for staff to go forward and embark on this effort. I think what Paul and John are presenting is, do you all want to be involved in this process or not?
Yeah, it's a different way to look at it. I think we do. Mr. Young, I see your hand up.
Thank you. My understanding from John's presentation is that the governing board asked us to do this. And that the governing board is in fact putting this in our hands. I'm fine with making a motion today. We've had this robust discussion. Over the next year, if we agree to this today, what the governing board will get is our collective recommendation. And they will get a sense of everything that has been put on the table and more. Have that focused, have it refined, of a year's worth of this discussion we had today. And that will be the report that they end up getting. And I'm not hesitant at all to go ahead and launch a scoping project today, because I'm quite confident that throughout that project, at the meetings that they bring information to us and questions to us, and we have opportunities for discussion, that this will all be put on the table again and refined and discussed in terms of specifics. And I don't think that any of our particular angst that we've raised today is in danger of not being covered or not being discussed as this project moves forward. I think it's quite clear that staff should expect what they heard today to be the theme throughout the project. So I'm perfectly happy to move this forward. And I can make a motion for you, Mr. Chair, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Eric. Let's hear one last comment from Mr. Teixeira, and we're going to give this motion a crack here.
So I appreciate what Eric articulated. I'd be prepared to second the motion in that spirit, and I appreciate the fact that Learned Counsel gave the compact version of the APC. There's also a charter of the APC that the governing board approved a couple of years ago, which broadens our ability to be involved in more things as code amendments. And I do think we've heard from our local government colleagues and others that we don't want this process to go forward without our involvement. So that's why I'm going to second the motion.
Okay, that makes good sense. Yeah, we're not asking TRPA to make local governments redo all of our area plans with new design standards. I think we've made that clear. Okay, given all of that, we have a very simple motion on the screen. I think we added the word scoping. I think that's very important, but I think we do want to perhaps append, and whoever's going to make this motion can decide, because I'm not going to make it, but can decide how they want to include, or if they want to include additional language mentioning the list and the direction that we've provided, which will be ultimately, I think, built into the work plan, hopefully. So.
Can I take a?
You may.
Mr. Chair, I heard Steve Teixeira say that, or Eric say rather, that he would be interested in making the motion. I don't want to step on his toes, but I do have
No,
a
please
way
feel free.
of presenting it
Yes.
if you would like to hear that.
Let's try it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Eric's okay with that.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the Community Design Standards Scoping Project Work Plan as presented and contained in the staff report, and that also contemplates the 10 points John Hester neatly summarized that resulted from APC member discussion of agenda item 4C in the July 8, 2026 APC agenda.
Good, Ellery.
Okay.
I'm happy to second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Are there any questions on the motion? Okay.
Mr. Chair,
We
my
are-
hand's up. Hope
Okay, Hope.
Sullivan. John Hester, can you read what you're putting into the motion about local government involvement?
You want me to read all 10 points? Or
No, I only care about
Okay.
the local government involvement.
direct meetings with local government staffs?
Thank you.
Have
And-
like
and-
have
and-
conduct
Yeah, we will.
have
those.
direct meetings
Yeah.
with. Okay.
And that may be, I think Kate recommended we all do it at once, or we could do it individually if we can't schedule it that way. I think the point is sit down with each local government and hear what their issues are, their standards are, all that.
Okay. Good. We have a motion. We have a second. We have clarified that motion. We're going to come to you, Tracy, for a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Letton,
Yes.
Mr. Swenson,
Yes.
Ms. Marolis O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Mr. Altman,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Drew, Ms. Foster,
Yes.
Ms. Cyber,
Yes.
Ms. Sullivan,
No.
Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that motion passes.
Thank you, Tracy. Also, Garth Alling asked me to just express his support for this project and the motion, despite the fact that he had to leave the meeting. So I know I can't vote for him, but I just wanted to share that on the record for Garth. Thank you all for that discussion. It was very robust. Hopefully, Paul, that gives you good direction moving forward. And we look forward to engaging with you on that. Okay. Good. It's 12:24. My stomach is starting to rumble, but we are going to go through some reports quickly, and then we will be on our way. So in item 5, Mr. Hester, I'm going to come to you for the executive director report.
Very quickly, I'll see if I can do this in about a minute. The board passed the monopine changes that you recommended last meeting. Upcoming, we have the report on the inventory, the benchmark, maybe August, maybe later. And then we have a Midtown area plan scheduled for October. And then we have the Tahoe Douglas area plan. Tentatively, we have it on our schedule for October, but I'm not sure that it's going to be ready at that point. That'd be up to Kate to add to that. And that's the end of my report.
Thanks, John. Any questions for John? Crystal?
So just to clarify, there is an August meeting, or you're not, it could be August or September, you're not sure?
Well, the only item we had was the
That,
presentation from
yeah.
the intern.
okay.
And if we can get her to move that back to September, that would give her more time. And we don't want to meet for just that one item.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John. Graham, we'll come to you.
Thanks. I thought I might report on the monopine, but I thought you were going to say the Tahoe Keys. Because we did, you did consider those code amendments, and that project did get approved by the board as well. The monopine ordinance, just as a something that may have gotten a little bit lost in that item, is that it also served as the basis to settle a lawsuit that we've been dealing with for multiple years. So I was just waiting to kind of have that, kind of go through, and pleased to report that the board did approve that ordinance, and we're able to settle that lawsuit. This was a challenge to TRPA's approval of a cell tower on Ski Run Boulevard. And it involved a lot more issues and things like that the plaintiffs had wanted TRPA to do. And we used that ordinance as a basis to part ways with these plaintiffs and go our separate ways, and hopefully achieve a win all around. So, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, to clarify, as Graham brought up, the board did approve your recommended code amendment on Tahoe Keys. They also approved the project, which was, I'm sorry, I didn't write that down. That was the major part of the item, was the project, but they did approve your code amendment as well.
Good. Yeah, that's a major project coming to the South Shore. Okay, good. APC members, it's our turn to share relevant updates. So we encourage you to do that. And I'm going to go in the room first, starting right down here with Ashley.
Ashley Cyber. Hi there, everybody. Got a few updates for the group. Obviously, we all just got through 4th of July, and that is always, an interesting experience on Tahoe beaches and things like that. For us this year on Forest Service beaches, we actually felt like it was very successful 4th of July. We have managed the 4th of July as an actual incident. So we have an incident response team that comes. And since we started doing that, we've had a pretty good 4th of July response. We had 30 Forest Service LEOs, in addition to all of the state and county police response in the area. So, from our perspective, it went really well. We, of course, have, hot spots around the lake, but we were, I guess, lucky for us, maybe unlucky for other folks, that we weren't the subject of the sort of roving hotspot that goes every year. It's moves from one, spot to the other. Last year it was Meeks. We were happy that didn't happen this year, but unfortunately some other folks got to experience that. One thing that has come up in discussions just about 4th of July and looking at after action reviews and things like that is a sort of thought that maybe there could be some additional discussions or work done from the tourism side in how we're promoting 4th of July for Tahoe, and whether we're, doing ourselves a disservice, or whether we're, getting the right message out to folks who are coming to Tahoe for 4th of July. And just, of course, there's no answer that I have to that, but just thinking through, how we're messaging this weekend and whether or not it's worth additional messaging. Of course, the cleanup is always a big thing afterwards as well. And we have local efforts, but we spend a lot of local time and local effort and local money dealing with, the impacts of the tourism that comes here for that one particular event, which I'm sure everybody in this room is familiar with. So on the weekend, or excuse me, the day before the weekend, on Thursday, folks may have seen there was a lightning start fire up on Angora Ridge. And that was a really great example of some fast response. They actually called out, had a helicopter response on that. Immediately, they were able to put that out right away. Just wanted to mention that as kind of a visible one, and we felt good about the response on that. We were able to get out there immediately. It was less than a half acre by the time they were able to put it out. Like I said, it was a lightning strike, and it did get the shrub layer going a little bit. But I just wanted to mention something specifically about that just for this group here. We had some Forest Service folks who live in the Angora neighborhood, and they were talking with their neighbors because they could see this happening, and they didn't know that they worked for the Forest Service. And there were some comments like, why did the Forest Service plant all that whitethorn? So I just want to do some clarification of the general Angora area in that, all that whitethorn has regenerated naturally. After the fire, we did do sprayed like a fiber mat type of a stuff out on the soil to try and get some soil retention, but we did not do any planting of shrubs in that area. We did do planting of seedlings in the area, and there is some needs in some of the areas for us actually to go back in and start thinning that again, because we had some good regeneration in areas where we were able to manage the seedlings better. In some of the areas where we were not able to do any like shrub release or come in and manage the shrub layer after we did the planting, those seedlings are a lot shorter and they're just now starting to pop out of the shrub layer. And that project is a really good example of why on the Caldor fire, we're looking to have the ability to do some shrub release where we do planting of seedlings, because it really helps with the overall regeneration rate as well as sort of the speed that those seedlings can start regenerating. So, Angora gives us some positive and maybe less positive examples of, the implications of reforestation in these burned areas. A couple other things. Meeks Creek, now is a really great time for anybody who wants to get out and see some active forest management. The Meeks Meadow area, this group and the board, I think, is pretty familiar with that project. We've been out on site a couple of times for some field trips. But if you go look out there now and you start walking along either the south side of the creek or along the road on the north side, it will amaze you the difference that it looks. And when you get to the back part of the meadow, the uplands part of the meadow on the west side, you can see where they are still continuing the mechanical work out there. And I mean, it's amazing. It's hard to describe. It's really literally a wall of lodgepole pine. I mean, so much so that you can't even really get in between. When they were doing the counts for this, they couldn't even get the right counts. It was so dense in that area. And they've come through, and in the meadow areas, it's complete removal. So you can kind of just see the line going along, and you can see the equipment coming in and just ripping up those trees and taking them out. It's a really great illustration of how much work that area needed, and we're really happy with the results. Having said that, there's still more work to go. We had a mechanical contract out in that area for mechanical work, and so they are going to accomplish what they can with the mechanical work, and then we are essentially at the phase now to kind of assess what's left and what is the best way to get out there and complete that work. And we're doing that work in combination with the Washoe tribe, their Washoe resource crew, and that has been last year and this year been great to get actually some implementation on the ground out there with those projects. We are going to begin implementation under the Lake Tahoe West project starting in 2027. We're getting some contracts together for that. We're also working on some contracts for the Caldor restoration footprint. So some of that work will also start in 2027. For those that are interested in the piece related to the reforestation and herbicide use in the Caldor restoration footprint, that's not planned until after initial entry occurs. So we go out on the site, we have to do the actual clearing of the trees and the hazards that are out there. We, in many areas, will also do a prescribed burn, broadcast burn in those areas, and then come in with our seedlings for replanting. And so that wouldn't happen until 2028 at least. With that, that's basically how that process works. And then in many areas, we're also seeing a higher regeneration rate than we initially had thought in some of these areas. So we do anticipate not needing, to help those seedlings along in as many areas as we thought. But that's essentially the process, is we have to get in there and get the trees out first, get the hazards out first, get the initial entry. In some areas, we'll also come through with some broadcast burning, and then we come in with our seedlings. And at that point, we're going to assess, where we even need to plant, because there is some natural regeneration. And then after that, we assess where, if we are going to plant, do we need to do some additional shrub release, either manually or using herbicides? So that's kind of the process of determining where that will occur. The basin-wide trails project, we have some partners beginning to implement some of the trails work on that project. I think 2027 is going to be a major time where some of those major projects are starting to get implemented. And of course, the e-bikes piece is essentially, it's on at this point, as far as the allowing e-bikes on certain trails, Class 1 e-bikes. We have a new fire chief, Chief 1, the Forest Service, Travis Thane. He's a new permanent. For anybody who was familiar with Carrie Thaler, he is her replacement. We also currently have a new acting forest supervisor, Aaron Gagnon. Eric Walker retired. We had one acting forest supervisor, Dion Uzez. Now we have Aaron. They are 120-day details, so about 4 months we expect that Aaron will be with us. They are, of course, working on getting a permanent in that position as well. And then the last piece I'll mention here, I've brought it up before, but just wanted to circle back with the group now that we're starting to get projects that are actually being implemented under the new NEPA regulations that came out from the USDA. Just as a reminder for folks, the Forest Service NEPA regulations were entirely rescinded, and we now have NEPA regulations under USDA. And then there are cover that entire USDA umbrella. And then there's a few agency specific things for us as well. And in these new NEPA regulations, there's an emphasis on the use of CE categories where we can. There's an emphasis on the use of existing NEPA projects, so existing NEPA documents that maybe are a little bit older, and taking those out and saying, what would we need to do to update this analysis, as opposed to embarking on a completely new analysis. In many of those cases, the analysis is still relevant. In some cases, we might need to do additional consultation for newly listed species that were not listed at the time of the analysis, things like that. And then there's also a new tool called Reliance, where, well, it's sort of a new tool. It did actually exist in one form or another in the previous regulations, but there's a new emphasis on this term called Reliance, where you're taking you're relying on the analysis from one project and applying it to another project. And I bring these up just to say that the Forest Service is figuring out how we're implementing all of these new regulations on our new projects that are coming up. And you may see NEPA look a little different. And some of the other pieces that have changed is the scoping requirements. There's a little more discretion for the forest supervisor to have input on what gets included, what doesn't, when we go to scoping, when we don't. So we're also working through, how then we're informing the public and keeping the public informed of the projects that we're working on. And so you'll just kind of see some changes as we go along here, and I'll keep the group apprised. And I think that's it for me then.
Okay, no shortage there.
Sorry.
That's good.
Summertime, it's a busy time.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. Yeah, good job on managing the fourth incident on all the destination stewardship coordination and things. I've heard a lot of good things about the way things are trending there. So it's good. Mr. Ehrlich.
Just to mention, after our May meeting discussion on the monopines, I hiked up to the Tahoe Mountain cell tower, which is a textured metal thing, 111 feet tall. Right on top, there's maybe one branch that has a couple side pieces. It looks pretty good. So that's a pretty tall one. There are trees around it, but I think some of it's a brown textured metal going pretty far up on it.
Good, yeah. Different tools in different places. Harry?
I'll just
Hi.
pass.
Okay. Thanks, Harry. Brad?
Nothing to report.
Thanks, Brad. Jennifer? No? The Stoller?
No.
Good. Hitch?
John mentioned the Tahoe Keys Marina Redevelopment Project. The city did approve it, but then it was promptly appealed. It's appealed to City Council. We're going to hear it in August. The crux of their argument is we need to do EIR and also TRPA do EIS. That's part of the argument, but for us, it's specific to the EIR.
Oh, boy. Okay. Yeah. One step forward. How many back? We're going online. Mr. Young.
Hi, thanks for a nice meeting today, everybody. I would be curious for a really quick briefing on the disposition of all the working groups. We had a chance today to be reminded of the Tahoe Living Working Group. We get to hear about them a lot. I'm on that one. So that's one we hear about. But when the work program a few years ago created these working groups, I think there were several, transportation and a couple other ones. I don't know if those still exist and are waiting for new projects, if they're doing projects. I kind of don't know if once the Tahoe Living Working Group is done with this, if there will be another thing for them to do. I don't know if these working groups were intended to be ongoing or just to do the original assignment. So I thought they were a great tool. And I actually think that this community design standards thing may benefit from one of those concepts, from a kind of a working group concept like the other ones, like those other subject matters benefited from. So at a future meeting, August, September, whenever we get around to it, I'd really love to hear about what's going on with the other working groups and just where that concept of the working group currently lies. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Good suggestion. Thank you. Mr. Teixeira.
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all.
Thank you, Steve. Mr. Letton.
Nothing here, thanks.
Thank you, Eric. Miss Sullivan, I do see you on there, but she said she needed to leave. Okay, I think she just dropped off. And then Kate did leave, but she, just so everyone who can't see the chat, she said that she does not anticipate the TDAP, that's the Tahoe Douglas Area Plan, to be ready in October. We've been working on it diligently. We anticipate blah, blah, blah. So that may not be coming in October, but I'm sure you'll hear more about that, John. You'll be gone anyway. And I don't think you'll be caring. You might have been, yeah, on the beach, just listening in.
Right.
Riveted. And I don't have any relevant updates to share today. So thank you all for a good meeting. We do have one final public interest comment period. So for members of the public joining us via the webinar, now's your opportunity to provide a public comment to the APC. Please be aware we are prohibited from taking any action on items not on our agenda. You can use the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or dial *9 on your telephone. You'll be unmuted by a TRPA staff member. And Catherine, I'll go to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are no hands raised online to comment.
Okay, and we will move on to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Yes, you do.
Thank you, Steve.
Seconded.
Okay, we are adjourned. It's right at 12:45. Enjoy your summer, and maybe we'll see you in August, but probably September.
Thank you.
Thank you all.